understand Deputy Binet might be online.
All right.
Deputy Binet, are you here?
Sorry. Madame le Deputy Miller.
Therefore.
So Deputy Miller is at a parliamentary event in Westminster. I wonder if she could be excused.
Or marked on state's business?
It's not strictly speaking. It's an event that she's been invited to that others from this assembly have attended. It is a parliamentary event, but I'm not sure it can be marked as state's business, rather be
Members
excused.
content to mark the deputy excuse? Excuse.
So could we have some more information about the nature of the, maybe circulated now we've agreed to mark her excuse?
So I'm quite happy to say she's at the National Westminster Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast.
Yes, thank you very much.
Monsieur le Deputy Binet.
Présent.
Thank you.
L'Assemblée est non, Monsieur le Président.
Les États sont constitués. Members will be saddened to learn that the former Greffier and Jurat Catherine Mary Newcombe, known to all as Mary, passed away last week. Although born in London, Jurat Newcombe's family had a strong connection with the island, and her father, Sidney, who was an architect, worked on a number of developments in Jersey after the war, including the maternity hospital in St Saviour's Road. When the Blitz in London began, both Jurat Newcombe and her sister were sent to their grandparents' home in Connétable, South Wales. After the war, she returned to London and notably performed along with her school choir on a children's favourites long-playing record in the early 1950s. She left school and joined a company called Impact, making animated films alongside Sylvia and Jerry Anderson, who later created the Thunderbirds franchise. In October 1963, when she was 26 years old, Jurat Newcombe decided to emigrate to Canada, but came to visit with family friends in Jersey en route and was persuaded to stay until the springtime. Of course, she never left. She began working with the British and Overseas, a subsidiary of J.W. Hulin, on the Esplanade, and then became aware of a vacancy as a committee clerk at the State's Greff, applied and was the successful candidate. Canada was soon forgotten, and they then followed a long and illustrious career at the State's Greff, during which time Jurat Newcombe became Chief Committee Clerk, Executive Officer of the newly created Policy and Resources Committee, before being sworn in as Deputy Greffier of the States in 1991, and Jersey's first ever female Greffier 9 years later in 2000. She retired from the State's Greff in October of 2002 and was elected a Jurat of the Royal Court in July of 2004, serving until her retirement in 2009. Those who were lucky enough to work alongside Jurat Newcombe, including our current Greffier, admired her ability to juggle the many competing demands of her role, taking it all in her stride, often surrounded by a cloud of cigarette smoke. She was generous, loyal, and kind, and as the first woman to hold the role of Greffier, was an inspiration to all other women. It was therefore fitting that last October, a room was named after her in this building, although sadly, owing to her declining health, she wasn't able to attend in person. Our thoughts are with her family at this sad time. I invite members to stand for a brief moment of reflection. May she rest in peace. Moving on to the order paper.
So before we start, can I just
Yes.
say this afternoon I have a medical appointment which I can't change, so I may not be here for an hour or so after lunch. As there's no mechanism for us to be excused due to medical appointments for a vote, if I miss a vote, it will be seen as not present for the vote. But I want to make clear for Hansard the reason why I may not be here if there is a vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the order paper, there is nothing under B. A number of documents have been presented or laid under C. The following matters have been lodged under D. P27, Amendment 2, Draft Elections, Electoral Registers, Jersey Amendment Law, Second Amendment, lodged on the 10th of June by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. P27, Amendment 2, Amendment, Draft Elections, Electoral Registers, Jersey Amendment Law, Second Amendment, lodged on the 17th of June by the Comité des Connétables. P47, Jersey Police Complaints Authority, appointment of members, lodged on the 10th of June by the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. P48, meanwhile use of the former gas place site, lodged on the 16th of June by Deputy Wall. P49, continuation of annual Jersey Opinions and Lifestyle Survey, lodged on the 17th of June by Deputy Dublé. P50, joined up public infrastructure framework for an ageing population, lodged on the 17th of June by Deputy Gardner. P51, Channel Islands Lottery Distributions of Proceeds 2025, lodged on the 20th of June by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. There is nothing under E, F, G or H. A number of written questions have been responded to under I.
Sir, can I raise a point of order in that, in relation to those written questions?
Yes, Deputy.
Written, in particular, under Standing Order 12.4 regarding the answer to written question 281. The question concerned when the airport received the bomb scare that led to the evacuation of the airport on March the 5th. And the Minister said he would contact ports and let me know in due course. He had 5 days to make one phone call and he didn't do so. It's a matter of considerable public interest because if there was a gap between when the warning arrived at the airport and when somebody at the airport saw it, then it's a potentially major security risk. And I would like you to rule on whether the Minister should reply to that immediately.
Yes, thank you, Deputy. I'll rule upon that within the time frame allowed by standing orders. Yes, Deputy.
So similarly, I have a written question. I'm sorry I don't have the number, sir, but it's the only one from that's just been answered this week from me.
Who was it to?
It was to the Minister for Economic Development, sir, and it relates to the boat being diverted to Guernsey for the Marathi and for the sports weekend and cancelled sailings. I asked if he was aware of the number of passengers that had been cancelled and bookings. His answer, I think, was equivocal in that he said that they don't hold the information for passengers that travel, but he didn't give me a straight answer as to whether he's aware of the numbers, sir. And I'd like you to rule after consideration on whether that sufficiently addresses the question.
Thank you very much. I will give that ruling. Now move on to oral questions. We have a...
Sir,
Yes, Deputy.
it's not quite a point of order, and at the risk of incurring the wrath of the posthumous Mary Newcombe, who held attire into a very high standard, sir. It's very warm in here, and would it be possible either for us to remove our jackets to invoke another Deputy of St John, or maybe we could have some air?
I'm afraid to say that the air conditioning has broken down in this room. And indeed other rooms in the building, as I understand it. That's nothing.
Should we call the Infrastructure Minister, sir?
You get some fans in. Are members content for people to remove their jackets, if that's... Slippery slope, sir. Is it a slippery... Is it serious? I'll put it to the vote if that's required. Yes.
So can we remove bow ties as well?
I don't know about bow ties. Yes, Connétable.
Well, we should be here frivolous. At least one member has a waistline or lack thereof, which demands he wears braces, and I suggest that it will be unedifying if those in that position were not to wear.
You haven't got to remove your jackets. So I'm not making an order that people should take their clothes off. It's purely optional. It seems to me that if someone wishes to remove a jacket in this heat, then they may do so.
Put some fans or something so there's
Yes,
hot
there are
air
some
in
fans on their way, but I don't know how effective they'll be.
Sir, may I ask whether women may remove jackets as well, sir?
I said people.
No, thank you.
I was very careful in my choice of words. Now, moving on to oral questions, we have 22 questions to get through today, which means only 6 to 7 minutes per question if we are to get through them all, and I hope that we do. So, with that remark in mind, I invite Deputy Doublé to put the first question to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister detail any plans that the Cost of Living Ministerial Group is developing to assist islanders with increases in the cost of living, including but not limited to plans relating to single-parent households, families with children and pensioner households?
Minister.
So I understand in the Minister's absence I'm responsible for answering the question.
Yes, Chief Minister.
Thank you. The government has delivered a range of actions to help reduce the impact of the increased cost of living on islanders, especially in the groups mentioned in the question. Action includes reducing GP fees, free school meals, introduction of a living wage, moving towards that, so now keeping duties, fees and charges low, expansion of nursery care, to name but a few, sir. These are all priorities approved in the Common Strategic Plan, sir, by the Assembly under the move of the government to bear down on cost of living by keeping fees and charges as low as possible. The Cost of Living Ministerial Group closely monitors inflation and cost of living pressures in Jersey. It provides background information which is used to make practical policy decisions and target support specific groups. The group is also working to better understand how cost of living affects specific demographic through the development of minimum income standards. These will define a minimum income needed for households to live in Jersey and will be developed for all household types, including parents and pensioners, which will go towards informing future policy and how we help islanders with the cost of living.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. As I understand it, the group has only met perhaps twice this year. Can the Chief Minister inform the Assembly what new measures have come directly from this group and whether he feels that this group is doing everything it can to address the cost of living pressures?
Thank you, sir. The ministerial group was officially established on the 15th of November last year, superseding the previous inflation strategy group, which was established in 2020, which I chaired at that time, so which produced a report at that time, which is still valid. I believe the group has met 4 times, and as I said before, it's really the individual ministers that have responsibility for various policies, for example, Treasury, Social Security, and such forth. And the group, its main focus now is on the cost of living group. So just trying to, yes, its focus now is on the minimum income standards work, sir, which is focusing on the specific demographic, so we can understand what the minimum income should be, sir.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister is answering on behalf of the Economic Development Minister, and he has not said anything in his answer about the private sector price pressures that were only mentioned on Radio 4 this morning, the increase in grocery prices. What is the Economic Development Minister, which he will know about, doing about market dominance? Are they using the JCRA? What action is being taken to evaluate the impact on the living wage on RPI and all the other competition issues? It's not just about the government putting lower charges in. It's about the market. That's the majority of the basket, isn't it?
Chief Minister.
I didn't provide an answer because I hadn't actually been, that question wasn't part of the original answer, but I'm pleased to try and provide one on behalf of the Minister. I mean, the Deputy knows full well the challenges we have in controlling inflation. A lot of inflation that lands with us is out of our hands. The Deputy will also know that we import something like 85% of the food we consume here. We don't have monetary policy, we have fiscal policy, so our actions are limited. Having said that, we know full well what those actions are, sir, which is why in the CSP, sir, we detailed that as one of our top priorities. We also, the Deputy know, because he was the member, I think, that took forward the establishment of the Competition Authority. We encourage competition wherever we possibly can, sir. Competition is one of the tools we have availability for, sir, to help islanders with the cost of living. That is working in some areas, and other areas, so I think we need to bear down a little bit harder, and that's work that's being overseen by the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary.
I don't want to take the Assembly's time up, sir, but the Minister will understand my concern of the lack of progress by the JCRA. There's a 6.4 article in the JCRA law which mandates the Minister to ask the JCRA for specific issues. I know they've asked them, but maybe we could have a discussion offline as to how we can get the JCRA to address the issues which a large amount of islanders are really concerned about.
Yes, so I'm happy to facilitate a meeting with the Deputy and the Economic Development Minister to discuss that important issue.
Thank you. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. Affordable housing has, especially in the rental sector, has constantly been identified as a key driver for the cost of living crisis, particularly impacting single-parent households and pensioners. In that context, does the Chief Minister believe that rent control measures, including a rent cap, are an effective way to help address these pressures?
Chief Minister.
I think it depends on various circumstances in relation to the individual sort of, I suppose, circumstance to which it applies. In principle, I don't like caps, but what's being proposed there is not technically a rent cap. It's a rent bar, if you like. It's a bar. It's a hurdle to say if landlords were to want to increase rent more than 5%, they have to have a reason to do it. I think anything that helps to introduce more affordable housing, sir, will have a beneficial impact on the cost of living, because as members will know from how our cost of living index is formulated, housing plays a big part of that, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir, thank you. And the cost of living ministerial group, of course, should look at a range of issues around the cost of living. So because the Chief Minister didn't mention affordable housing, is this something that has not been on the agenda to ensure that there's support across the ministers who sit on the cost of living ministerial group to such things on affordable housing?
Again, sir, I refer members to the Common Strategic Policy that was approved by this Assembly, where affordable housing, the provision of more affordable housing, is probably our number one priority. Members will have seen significant steps forward over the last year with more homes becoming available. Step-up scheme, more help to buy schemes today. Just today, Sir Andium have announced a new shared equity scheme. Of course, sir, that's also been assisted, I say, although it's not always good to see a falling house price market, the fact that the cost of homes has come down, I think, has also helped more people onto the property ladder, sir.
That completes the time for that question. So for a final supplementary
So, see my light, sorry.
I did. I regret to say that the time for that question has now expired. We have to be quite strict to get through these all the questions we've got. There's 22 today, and we don't want to have a situation arising where there are a number of unanswered questions at the end. Final supplementary, Deputy Doublé? Yes, I regret to say that there'll only be time for 2 or 3 questions from other members. Yes. Yes.
So can I just put it on record? I think it'd be helpful if PPC were to look at a system so that members knew who's been selected to speak and who hasn't, and maybe use this better use of the screen. So I just put it out there for them to consider, and it might be helpful also for.
Well, in that
for
case,
everyone.
I'll just say which members will be.
Thank you, sir.
Put their lights on so everyone knows. Final supplementary, Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. What I would like to understand from the Chief Minister is, are the Cost of Living Ministerial Group utilising the available data on the households mentioned in the initial question and other households to target specific measures to islanders who are in most need of solutions helping with the cost of living? Is the Cost of Living Ministerial Group doing this in a coordinated way? If that's not happening already, what plans does the Chief Minister and other ministers have to make this happen?
Thank you, sir. The group is working, like I say, its key focus at the moment is working to better understand how cost of living pressures affect specific demographics through the development of the minimum income standards piece of work. To do that piece of work, the group will need access to all of the relevant statistics because it can't formulate a policy without these, but I will make sure that we are, or the Minister can confirm upon his return the process being followed in that piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Question 2, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for the Environment. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Further to the publication of R80 2025 and the proposed extension to Jersey of the International Convention on the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, will the Minister provide an update on the extension to and the nature and extent of tuna fishing that he anticipates will take place in Jersey waters?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I'm grateful to the Deputy for the question because it allows me to tell the Assembly a few small details not covered in our 80, and that is that for the last 4 years, over 4 years now, the Marine Resources Department have been in researching this area alongside and in conjunction with Exeter University and with the UK government via DEFRA to understand more about tuna. The extension that the Deputy refers to in the question to the extension of ICAT to Jersey is in its final stages. Government House has written to the Ministry of Justice who are kindly progressing this issue as a priority, I'm told. My intention is to establish a catch and release charter fishery for this 2025 summer season. That would run from August to October if all the signatories can be put in place. That will follow the principles of the UK and the Jersey rules on charter vessels. This would be for a maximum of 5 commercial operations and would run under a strict scientific exemption to the wildlife law. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful to the Minister for that clarification. Can he just clarify for the avoidance of doubt, within the Charter Catch and Release programme, how many licences will be issued each year and therefore how many fish will potentially be caught under this scheme?
Minister.
So, as I've already said, my intention is to issue 5 licences for the summer under catch and release, which would be exactly what it says on the tin. The authorisation would be to catch fish and to return them to the water alive. There will be some strict rules about how this can be done. It's going to be really important that these fish are caught quickly, returned to the boat and released under a very strict regime to ensure that the vast majority of them, as many as possible, will still be alive. And they're big, strong fish, and they're very capable of doing that. Into the future, I would just like to say to the Assembly, for the avoidance of doubt, now that we know that there's many hundreds, if not thousands, of these fish swimming around in our waters, it would be my intention next year to remove the species from the wildlife law and to manage it specifically with other fish under the fisheries regulations in the future. And that I hope that sometime in the future we may be granted a small quota which may allow us to land a very small number of very high-grade fish for consumption in the local market, knowing, of course, that tunas are very popular fish and bought in great quantities in supermarkets. If we can do that locally, I look forward to being able to do that. But that would be my intention for this summer, 5 commercial licences.
We have time for questions from Deputy Jern, Deputy Alex Curtis and Deputy Tadia, I hope. Deputy Jern.
Thank Thank you, sir. Given that up to 30% of tuna do not survive after being released due to stress of being hooked, handled and exhausted during capture, what measures specifically, though you mentioned some, but what specific measures will the department take to ensure fishing practices meet the conditions necessary to reduce post-release mortality, and what sanctions will be put in place if the rules are broken?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I have to say to the Deputy, that's not my information, but I take on board that with any catch and release fishery, there's always a very small chance that some fish may not survive being caught and returned to the wild. But which is why I say two things. First one, the North Atlantic bluefin tuna is a very, very strong fish and capable of withstanding being caught and released. But more importantly, I say to the Deputy, that's why I said there will be some very strict rules about how this fishery will happen, and people will only receive a licence when they have the facilities on board the vessels to land these fish very quickly without a long fight, which would exhaust them and make them very tired and less likely to survive. So land them quickly, treat them properly on the boat so that they can be dehooked and returned to the water in a very short period of time. And that's the way we make sure that the very vast majority of them stay alive. But those rules will be strictly enforced. I can't say to the Deputy how they will be enforced, but certainly boats will have to have all that equipment on board before they receive a licence.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Actually, that 30% comes from the ICCAT, so the Commission for Atlantic Tuna, for post-release mortality. But I guess my follow-up question would be that the Minister talks about, for the moment, to be charter, catch and release only, and then potentially going on to commercial fishing. How would this happen? Through ministerial order or through coming to the Assembly? How would this change happen?
Minister.
How would we know?
Sir, I can't tell the Deputy exactly how that would be done, ministerial order or by regular coming back to this Assembly, but I will find out and let her know.
Thank you. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister just able to firm up a bit on the timetable he shared, just for clarity, both on when the kind of strict guidance he knows anyone applying for a licence would be able to get, when the licence application period he expects would be open, and therefore how long he sees the catch and release season for 2025 would be for those operators?
Minister.
Sir, these fish are only in our waters for quite a short period of time during the late summer, early autumn. It would be my intention to operate this catch and release fishery between August, September and October. Those would be quite strictly controlled times, but to be honest, I'm not sure we would need to put a time because the fish will disappear. They will only arrive at a particular time and then disappear. And I can't remember the other part of the Deputy's question. I apologise.
It was when licensing would open for those who would want one of the 5 licences.
Yes, thank you, Deputy. I apologise. Until I get the final signatory for the Ministry of Justice in the UK, I'm not in a position to open for applications, but I know that the word is out there, and I know that we have currently 2 vessels that are showing interest. Hopefully there'll be a couple more, but there's no opening or closing of licence applications as we receive them. I will deal with them, and I'm prepared to issue up to 5 of those licences.
Thank you. Supplementary? Deputy Tellier.
So the Channel Islands is already under scrutiny from bodies like PETA, the animal cruelty watchdog, so to speak. And they say that catch and release fishing is cruelty disguised as sport, and that studies show that fish who are caught and then returned to the water suffer severe physiological stress and often die of shock. Does the Minister think that the potential negative publicity for Jersey, not just not in addition to the potential cruelty, is worth the bother, sir, and the commercial input that it might have? And would it not actually be better to focus our energy and marketing on conservation, sir, and the blue marine status that we aspire to have in Jersey?
Minister.
Sir, the acronym ICAT refers to an international convention on the conservation of Atlantic tuna, and I think that's really important. This is a body that's been around for over 10 years now, an international body that regulates tuna fishing all over the world where it can, and is, like I am, committed to management. But I have to say to the Assembly, these fish are arriving in very great numbers around our coast, not only our own coast, Western Channel, around the Celtic Deeps, the west coast of Ireland and the Western Isles in Scotland. And in this part of the world, they are proliferating and surviving and coping, breeding really well. If we're going to get into a debate about commerciality and animals, we're going to be here a very long time. We catch an enormous amount of species out of the sea. We eat meat, we eat various types of, all sorts of food, which involves animals. And catch and release has worked very well for us in the past. I referred the Deputy to the bass species in Jersey 10 years ago. We introduced catch and release. It did wonders for the population of bass around our islands, which has proved to be a great success. And I think a small number of animals being caught and released is not a problem for me, so thank you.
Supplementary, yes.
Does the Minister recognise that the number of these animals that are around is completely irrelevant? There are lots of seagulls that exist in Jersey. We're not suggesting that their protected status should be removed. So will the Minister give a clear indication, because he is the Minister for the Environment after all, that actually there is an element of cruelty that exists in this, and it's simply for being put forward for people's leisure and for sport, and that he is comfortable with that as Environment Minister for a small amount of potential economic gain for some people in Jersey?
Minister.
Yes, sir, I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to go further and say next year I'm hoping that we will allow a very small number of fish not just to be caught and released, but actually be caught and landed, so that if the meat is treated in the proper way, it can fulfil the needs of islanders who, as I said in my initial answer, at the moment are going to supermarkets and buying large amounts of tuna. I consider it much more beneficial to us if we could catch a few fish every year and put that onto the Jersey market rather than go to supermarkets. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary. Dr. Raneth.
So the risk is that, having just seen the species move into our water, our instinct is to hunt it for commercial purposes. Does the Minister accept that abundance may be due to fish moving due to warm waters from the south to the north, and therefore the appearance of abundance may be an illusion of fish migrating further north than in the past, rather than growing stocks? And will he therefore assure the Assembly that any opening to commercial fishing will be justified scientifically?
Minister.
Absolutely, sir. I'm very happy to make that commitment. As I said, we had to work for over 4 years now with Exeter University and the UK government to make sure that we know there's enough fish in our local waters in order to be able to catch a few. And moving forward, I think that the Deputy's right. We can see that our sea temperatures are rising. We know that the traditional brown crab is moving further north and now very popular in the North Sea itself. We know we have octopus moving into our waters, which is a direct result of the waters warming, and I have no doubt that tuna appearing in our waters and adjacent coasts over the last 10 years is something to do with waters warming up. And it may well be that these fish have moved up further south, where they would have been controlled just in the same way as they will be here under ICAT rules. All the countries around our coast sign up part of the convention of ICAT, and as far as I'm concerned, yes, they are maybe well coming into our waters because of warming temperatures, but we just want to be treated the same as all the other countries around us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 3, Deputy Gardner will put to the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. Further to his response to written question 268/2025, regarding the upkeep of the West Park Sea Pool, in which he confirmed that no remedial works had been undertaken, will the Minister advise what public engagement, if any, has taken place regarding the future of this amenity, and whether he has undertaken any assessment of the impact of the proposed waterfront facilities on the use of the pool?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. So in terms of public engagement, I understand the Deputy hosted a public meeting to discuss this amenity. 2,190 responses were received to the waterfront public survey which was undertaken in November last year. Just 9 responses made any reference to the Victorian Marine Lake and is not included in the plans put forward by the Jersey Development Company for the waterfront. The proposed 50-metre outdoor pool on the waterfront is not comparable with the Victorian Marine Lake, and therefore no assessment has been made on any impact. We should keep in mind that the pool, whilst I'm sure of its day, has been largely non-operational for decades, save for a few years from 2014. £315,000 was spent then, and more would be required now. We do need to make the pool safe in the short term, but we need to think very carefully as to whether it is needed for the future, and if spending more money to repair it represents value for the taxpayer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for the response, and the number 200 plus responded to the pool. It's an interesting one. Given the pool's historic significance and long-standing use by CIS Women's Group, does the Minister agree that its loss would diminish cultural heritage and recreational benefit in the island's capital, where more than 30% of population live?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the Deputy will be aware of the significant investment just around the coast in St Helier that we've made at Havre des Pas, sir, and we continue to make. Sir, the tide comes up twice a day and therefore makes the swimming pool not necessary. Sir, we have to be careful what we spend. We also have to make sure that the facility is safe, and that is my commitment. Thank you.
Deputy Dublet.
Thank you, sir. The facility in question is one of the more accessible beaches for families living in St Helier and St Saviour, and particularly for low-income families who may only be able to walk or get a bus. What assessment has been done of the impact on those families?
Minister.
So no specific assessment has been done, sir, but at its deepest point, the pool is currently 10 foot, sir, and I think that's possibly too deep for some young children. So the plan is, where the wall is damaged, is to lower the wall so that we still have water retained there, but not as much. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Final supplementary, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister engage with the West Park Marine Victorian Lake users and update what possible refurbishments can be made?
Minister.
More than happy to make that commitment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question for Deputy Wilson will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, or perhaps the Chief Minister. Yes, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what communication, if any, he has received regarding the reasons for the continued disruption to both air and sea travel, and whether performance measures exist with operators for the level of service delivered to those travelling to and from the island?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Government expects all operators to give affected customers their fullest support in the event of any disruption, and this is particularly important for the Lifeline services to Southampton for medical appointments. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development has recently met with Blue Islands to discuss recent challenges resulting from their fleet availability and a series of technical issues. He will be closely monitoring the situation as a new aircraft comes into service and they operate a revised schedule to ensure the level of service improves. In addition, sir, the Government and the ports of Jersey have been working closely with the FDS as they stand up their new service. This has taken place in a short period of time and has led to schedule changes and delays, sir. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development was recently in the UK alongside the FDS to meet with key groups in our supply chain. We have strongly emphasised that any disruption to passengers must be kept to a minimum, should be communicated early and should be fairly compensated, and will continue to monitor through performance measures attached to the operating agreement, which for the first time includes a more robust set of KPIs which DFDS must satisfy, which include punctuality and customer satisfaction.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. And it's pleasing to hear there's quite a bit of progress. But does the Minister accept that this level of performance is far from reducing travel uncertainty for islanders and visitors to the island, and something which was promised certainly in relation to the DFDS contract? And does he consider travel resilience in the island is in need of further improvement? And if so, how will this be done?
Chief Minister.
I think both Blue Islands and DFDS can do better. We always expected a bumpy start with a change of ferry operator, and I expect that would take at least 12 months to bed in to get to the place where we want it to be. And of course, there's significant new investment coming along over the next 3 to 4 years, which will see a brand new fleet come into operation for DFDS. And I would remind members that there are works to improve the St Malo port over the winter, which means instead of 2 berths being available, there will be 1. So that's going to prevent new challenges in the not too distant future. Could the Deputy just remind me of the second part of the question?
Thank you, sir. It was to do with travel resilience. I mean, given the amount of disruption that has been caused in a very short period of time, and if I could just highlight the reason why I'm raising this question, 13% of weekly summer flights were taken out of service from the 23rd of May onwards, and from March the 27th through to April the 16th, passengers travelling with DFDS experienced delays due to technical issues, cancellations on sailings, and changes to schedules on sailings to and from St Malo. Given what he's just said, is this going to get better, or will we see a reduction and a deterioration in the service offered to islanders?
Thank you, sir. It will and has to get better, sir, although the cancellation and rates have been lower than expected, sir. And we have to remember, we've all got short memories, but with the previous operator over many years, we've experienced far more and outages and cancellations in the past. But I think, sir, as DFDS sort of grow into the role, things are getting better. It's starting to improve now, touch wood. Sir, but I stress there are robust KPIs in the operating agreement with DFDS, which are more capable of holding them to account than the previous agreement.
Other questions from Deputy Ozef and Deputy Garner before we go to the final supplementary. Deputy Ozef.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if the Chief Minister would confirm whether or not the Council of Ministers and the Economic Development Minister put in place a single point of assistance for DFDS in order to transition. One supports the issue of DFDS, but was there and is there plans to actually deal with a single point, because it's not clear whether or not it's ports, Visit Jersey, the Minister, or whoever, and is it not important that because DFCS needs to operate properly, they need a single point of government to have some authority in order to deal with travel disruption?
On operational matters, sir, the single point of contact is with Ports of Jersey. On other matters in relation to marketing, it's with the industry, it's with Visit Jersey, and it's with others, sir, on other issues. It's with the government, so there can be no single point, one stop does all because of the nature of the business. But what I can reassure the Deputy and members is Ports and government and Visit Jersey and the industry will work closely together to help DFDS settle in as quickly as possible, sir, and start rebuilding the sea numbers outside of the challenges we've had with local transportation, sir. The Deputy and others will know that tourism globally is suffering, sir, due to the instability, and where I'm afraid we're not free from that, sir, and we need to do everything we can to help rebuild it, sir. And I hope, which will include an increase to the tourism marketing budgets and the budgeting process, because we need all the help we can get to for the industry.
Supplementary?
So I think the only thing I have on this issue in common is the same colour as our tie. I'm not going to take the Assembly's time up, sir. But can the Chief Minister not understand the fact he says all these different bodies are responsible? Do we not need a single point of responsibility for Blue Islands and DFDS in order to deal with people's genuine hardship?
Chief Minister.
Be fine. He doesn't need to go on.
I'll reply to the Deputy in the same theme, sir. And did he not understand my previous answer? Single point of call on operational issues is Ports of Jersey, sir. They interact with the government on certain issues, sir, and with the industry and with Visit Jersey on others. Okay, I guess the single point of call, the buck stops with the Minister, sir, but there are no plans to have a one stop for everything for DFDS as a conduit into government. So we have a relationship with them which works well, to stress so the Deputy can understand, with the Government Minister, with Ports of Jersey, and with the industry and Visit Jersey, sir. And all of those are working well, I'm pleased to say.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister refers to have one point of contact now. Have the FDS consulted with the government when they decide to change Monday schedule sailing to France and introducing schedule to Guernsey, which affected Year 6 students who due to travel to French trip and need to arrive now almost at midnight to their accommodation? Has government been consulted? Why it's Monday, not to Tuesday, for example, when we know that all Year 6 students going for their French trip?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the government was consulted. I understand Deputy Morel led on that with officials. I was not party to that. Before that Monday service, we didn't have a service. So I'm not sure how it impacted as the Deputy describes. I'm not satisfied with the level of sea transport between Jersey and Guernsey as yet. Although we have new services coming in for passengers, we are still lacking on car and vehicle opportunities for islanders to travel between. And I know we are urging both DFDS and Connétable and Guernsey Port authorities to work as collaboratively as possible so we can improve that, sir. And I would stress that DFDS has put this on as a trial period, so I really do hope islanders in both islands use it. I know the timings, the days aren't ideal. We've got a Monday and a Wednesday. I'd like to see something closer to the weekend, but let's see how that pans out.
Supplementary?
Absolutely. I agree that we need to have service to Guernsey, but this service could be introduced on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when we don't have children Year 6 from all most of the primary schools travel to France. Will the Minister believe it's acceptable to change timetable and not to engage with the main travellers on that, especially to affect children, school groups arriving now midnight to their destination?
Chief Minister.
I think, sir, as we approach the school holidays, I think it's probably too late for this year. Like I say, I hope we can improve inter-island services in the future. The FDS has had to build the schedule they've put in on a Monday around the rest of the fleet, and so it had minimal impacts on the busy routes to St Malo and the UK. But that's certainly something I know the Minister will be open to discussing, sir, for the future. Because one thing we all want is for the inter-island transport links to be as convenient as possible for all users.
Thank you. Deputy Wilson, final supplementary.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to the Chief Minister for standing in. I just wanted to ask, he mentioned key performance indicators in relation to strengthening those with each of the providers. Would he commit to publishing a performance review of all passenger transport operators servicing the island, and also set out what further action would be taken if there is a failure to restore the service levels or if the service standards are not met?
Chief Minister.
I can't commit to that, sir, without discussing it with the Economic Development Minister, but that's a discussion we should have, because I do understand the concern around some areas of our transport links. Having said that, I think Jersey remains to be very well served, especially by air, by a number of operators throughout the UK, and we have new routes to Europe now. And I think Ports of Jersey have done a very good job in developing those links, and we are making progress with the new shipping operator, sir. And like I said, it's going to be a bumpy start, but I have full confidence we're going to get into a very good place, sir, as soon as possible.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Question 5, the Connétable of St Helier will put to the Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Where a person is tried in the Magistrates' Court or Royal Court and is either found innocent or acquitted due to no evidence being presented by the prosecution, and awarded costs, will His Majesty's Attorney General advise what proportion of the person's legal costs will be reimbursed, and if the proportion is not 100%, explain why?
Solicitor General.
Yes, so the proportion of a successful defendant's costs which will be reimbursed to them from the public purse is an amount that is assessed to be reasonably sufficient to compensate them for costs actually reasonably and properly incurred and which are reasonable in amount. That is the costs in criminal cases law of 1961. So the amount that might be recovered may be 100% of what they've actually spent on their lawyer. It may be less, and in some instances it may be appreciably less. The question is not how much they have in fact spent on their lawyer, but whether they have spent is properly incurred and is reasonable in amount. If the amount of those costs cannot be agreed with the prosecution, then those costs will be assessed by a taxation officer, whose job it will be to determine whether the costs claimed have been properly incurred and are reasonable in amount. One of the things a taxation officer will consider when carrying out that assessment is the fee rates for lawyers which have been fixed by the bailiff and which are known as Factor A rates. Those rates set out for taxation purposes the maximum hourly rates applicable to private practice lawyers. So, because the Jersey legal market is a free market, defendants who are too wealthy to qualify for legal aid are free to instruct their lawyer of choice. Lawyers are free to set their own fee levels. In many instances, those levels will be higher and sometimes significantly higher than the Factor A rates set by the bailiff. That discrepancy between what the court determines the public purse should pay to reimburse a successful defendant and what the defendant's lawyers have charged them will in many instances explain why what a successful defendant recovers after taxation is less than what they have spent.
You bring your answer to an end now, it's been nearly
Yes.
2 minutes.
I'm grateful. Well, that is all I will say. Taxing officers have a responsibility not to write a blank cheque on the public purse. They assess for reasonableness and make an order accordingly.
Supplementary and then questions from Deputy War and Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm troubled by the use of the word wealthy. Is there not a problem that hard-working local families with a mortgage may be deterred from seeking to prove their innocence because of the risk of financial ruin? I'm aware of a particular case in which the costs are tens of thousands of pounds more than have been awarded. And I'm not sure, having looked at them, that they were improperly incurred or indeed that they were unreasonable. Thank you, sir.
I didn't use the word wealthy in any sense to connote wealth. I meant to say that you have too much wealth, and it may be quite a low standard, to qualify for free legal aid. I'm aware of the case which the Connétable refers to. That was a case in which the fees were subject to taxation, and the taxing officer determined that the reasonable amount of fees was considerably lower than that which had been charged by the lawyer.
Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. If it is agreed that more financial assistance should be given to islanders to meet their legal costs in cases where they are acquitted of a crime, what potential sources of funding are there?
Solicitor, can you answer this question?
I don't think that's a question I can answer. It probably is a policy question for others.
Any other question you want to ask?
If you can't answer the question, I guess I can't really follow that up.
Further, Solicitor. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. With the Solicitor General advice, if there are fees established by the bailiff office are publicly available, that people can assess what lawyer they can afford to hire to be able to reimburse 100%.
Yes, the Factor A rates are publicly available on the Jersey Legal Information Board. I should say that lawyers really ought to have a duty at the outset to advise a client not only what their own fees are, but what the Factor A rates are, and explain that even if a defendant is acquitted, they may well recover less in costs than they've spent. That information enables a defendant, as it were, to shop around for a more reasonably priced lawyer.
Supplementary.
Thank you. if the rates that published on the website are realistic for the private market currently exist in Jersey, and if there is a duty of the lawyer to inform that their charges are higher than on the agreed bailiff page.
So, General.
I'm so sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. Can I ask the Deputy?
First question, if the rates that currently available, are they realistic for, or are they average, above the average, less than average on the private market? And the second part was, if there is a duty of the private lawyer to inform the client about the existed rates that they will be reimbursed.
Well, they are the rates that have been determined by the bailiff to be appropriate and reasonable to reimburse lawyers' fees in the private sector on taxation. Is there a duty? In my view, there is a duty on a lawyer to inform a client of the financial ramifications of that lawyer acting for them.
Final supplementary, Connétable.
Thank you, sir. I hope I am not being impertinent. If I could just begin by saying I feel slightly uncomfortable, sir, asking these questions with you in the chair, and I think it perhaps would have been more appropriate for the Greffier to have chaired this particular question. I don't know whether you want to respond to that now or...
There's no facility to obviously ask questions of the presiding officer, but it's simply question time, and you shouldn't feel at all uncomfortable, but consider the point you make, and I'll bear that in mind if similar questions are asked in the future.
I'm grateful, sir. So His Majesty's Solicitor General seems to me to be pointing the finger to some extent at overcharging lawyers in the island for the difficulty that some people find themselves in when seeking justice. Is it not the case that the Law Officers Department does have to bear some responsibility in this matter, because it is that department that can escalate a case and mean that it is prolonged and perpetuated and ends up costing the litigants far more than they anticipated?
Solicitor.
Well, I'm not going to comment on a particular case. The Law Officers Department prosecutes when the prosecutor's test is met and continues for as long as there's a realistic prospect of conviction. If the law officers, the Attorney General, is deemed to have behaved inappropriately in a particular prosecution, it's always open to a court to order that costs are paid on what's called the indemnity basis, which is a somewhat more punitive basis and means more can be recovered. The case which the Connétable, I know, has foremost in his mind was not a case which resulted in an award of costs on the indemnity basis.
Thank you, Solicitor. Question 6, Deputy Miles will put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister outline his vision and strategy for the provision of high-quality childcare for 2 to 3-year-old children in States primary schools?
Yes, Minister.
So, thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. I currently have no planned expansion of school-based 2 to 3 provision, and this reflects data from the last Childcare Providers Survey, Q4 2024, that said that there are sufficient places in the registered childcare sector. However, sir, the childcare pilots in schools, Douay Dinkies at Plat Douay, Stay and Play with the JCCT at D'Auvergne, are showing very positive early results in children's learning, development, communication and language. So I plan to sustain them for the foreseeable future. These provisions are making a significant difference, and these children will now be starting nursery in September in line with their peers and not significantly behind. Similarly, sir, the Best Start Plus offers to families in Rouge Bouillon and Little Phoenix, called Little Phoenix, and Samurai Pathways will also continue. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
I thank the Minister for his answer. On the basis that the pilots are going to continue, will this provision be solely for children with identified additional needs, or will it become a universal offer?
Thank you, sir. So early indicators from the first parent survey, which I plan to publish in the summer, indicate continued difficulty in securing childcare places for children with additional needs. And in this deployment of those particular places at the moment, which is addressing this need, and that needs to enable young people to be able to start school on a sort of par, in terms of developmental par with others, is really important. So that's, if you like, the area I think we'll focus on around our schools. But the universal offer for 2 to 3 year olds will be available, because there are places available for 2 to 3 year olds, it appears, across our sector, which is quite reassuring. So there will be a universal offer, but the targeted support, I think, is the right thing to do as well.
Questions from Deputy Catherine Curtis and then Deputy Joan and possibly Deputy Doublé. Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister plan to meet with the private nursery providers this year to discuss plans?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There have been a number of ongoing meetings with the providers. I've detailed them to the panel, not necessarily just myself, but certainly officers as well, to talk about a whole range of the factors involved to 2 to 3 year olds. Whether me meeting personally is going to add to that, or I just simply discuss what's already been discussed, I don't know. But I'm always open to meeting with all stakeholders, as long as there's a positive outcome and we're adding to what's already happening with the dialogue that is happening in the background. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. Has the Minister assessed the impact, if any, on the private nursery providers, and would it not be helpful for him to speak to them directly?
Thank you, sir. Yes, the impact on private nursery providers, such things as what would be the rate for a 2 to 3 year old, they are directly involved with, because they are discussing with officers from the economic department where we are coming up with a model for the 2 to 3 year old provision. I can also sit and discuss that if that's what's wanted. I've made clear that I'm not expanding the 2 to 3 year old provision in schools because of the provision that's available across nurseries, so that's support for that. These changes are no threat to any nurseries. They are simply there to try and increase provision for 2 to 3 year olds, for hours for parents and for children. That's the most important part of this. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Joan.
Thank you, sir, and thank the Minister for his answer so far. And as I'm not been following this closely, if a question to the Minister just understand some of his answers. Of course, nursery. We all know that nursery provisions have a huge cost to many families, and women have to choose sometimes between following their career and taking time off because of that. And so when the Minister is talking about universal offer, what does this actually mean for families? Does this mean a discount to going for 2 to 3 year olds, a free offer in the nursery? So just to understand what he means by universal offer.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So I assume that the Deputy is talking about for 2 to 3 year olds?
Yes, this question is
so currently, and this has not been finalised yet, so I'm not announcing anything now. I want to make that clear. But I have talked repeatedly about the provision of 15 hours of paid-for childcare to be used in nurseries, universally available to everybody. And the question is whether that will be for 35 or 48 weeks per year. I personally would want it to be for 48 weeks per year. So that's the type of provision that's been made available for 2 to 3 year olds. And then that goes in conjunction with the 30 hours that's available for 3 to 4 year olds through the NEF. But the 2 to 3 year old provision would be available for childminders as well. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary? Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. So I can see the Minister is addressing the affordability of childcare. Can he comment on the accessibility in terms of the hours available? What time do these provisions open and close? And indeed, what is the Minister doing to ensure that the private nurseries who provide the bulk of those extended nursery hours, that they are able to continue and that they don't close and that we lose spaces for this age group?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes. In terms of the... Sorry, I lost the first part of the question because I was focused on the second. Could you say the first part again?
So the hours in the primary schools that this provision is available, but also what the Minister is doing in the private sector to make sure that those extended hours are still available in the private sector.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, the 2 to 3 provision will be for 15 hours, which, I mean, parents may need to pay for additional hours, but at the moment, if you have your child in full-time nursery care, you will be paying for every single hour of that. So that's the reality of it. So I don't see this as a threat to any private nurseries. Private nurseries have been involved in the discussions over what this rate would be. In terms of the hours available for private nurseries, they do vary across the island, and they are private businesses. So I cannot determine what hours they provide. I would hope that across the sector, this would provide a greater opportunity for people to put their children to use those nursery hours in as flexible way as possible, in order just to help families in the best way they can. A classic example for me is if this is used for 2 days a week and we can get somebody returning, for example, to the education workforce for 2 days a week, it would be very, very useful for the education workforce. So this fits into a number of areas across our society in terms of what need, the need that we have, and supporting parents, which I know when you have young children is really, really hard work.
Supplementary?
Thank you, Sir. And a shared goal across successive governments has been to improve the quality available in early years. One of the goals was to have some funded early years teachers in private settings. Are we any closer to this goal, to achieving that, and having funded early years teachers that we send into the private nurseries to help them with their staffing and the quality?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. In terms of early years teachers, if you mean teacher qualified, that isn't part of this scheme. No, it isn't. In terms of the quality of provision, there is training provided throughout for staff in private nurseries, and I'm pleased to say that we're working with childminders as well to provide training when it's accessible to them, and that's been a really good uptake, and there's been a very positive response from childminders, which I'd like to thank them for publicly, actually, because it's a really positive way forward that we're getting. In terms of teachers in private nurseries, I think there is an issue around the perception of that as to whether it's childcare or teaching, and I think we've got to move on from that, and we've got to all look and say, okay, what is it we want best for our children, which is good quality childcare for everybody, for all children that are available for all children across our provision, so that they can reach their best goals. So I just add just quickly, this is why targeting the provision in those schools for those most needy children, to get them, if you like, up to a point where they are ready for their primary school starting, is such an important point of what's going on here. And there will be a significant number of children who are more ready for school than they ever would have been. And so they start early on and catch up early on and don't lose that later on. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. In view of the fact that high-quality childcare is expensive, can the Minister tell us what financial modelling has been done to understand the full funding implications of this strategy and whether we're going to be able to afford it?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And yes, that the money is always the issue, absolutely. And the model has been, the modelling I've undertaken, which we are still working on, but I'm happy to share with the panel when we've got it, is to whether we have 15 hours, 30 hours, whether it's 30 weeks a year, 48 weeks a year, where we would have the best impact. Yes, sir, there will be a cost, but I would say that cost is an investment in our families, it's an investment in our children, and it's something that we should take the brunt of that cost. So I would be very supportive of spending that money in this area. And I'm pretty sure that I think across this Assembly there may be support for that as well, given the needs that we have for our young people on the island.
Thank you, Minister. Question 7, Deputy Andrews will put to the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Further to the adoption of the budget 2025 to 2028, will the Minister advise what progress, if any, has been made in long-term planning to increase a strategic reserve fund, and whether consideration has been or is to be given to increasing the value of the fund as a percentage of the island's gross value added?
Thank you, sir. The strategic reserve is, of course, a vital part of our fiscal strategy supporting economic confidence and financial stability. The 2024 annual accounts show the value of the strategic reserve increased by 8.5%. That's £93 million during 2024. While the GVA figures for 24 aren't available, the Fiscal Policy Panel has forecast GVA increase 1.9%, suggesting that growth in the strategic reserve is likely to have outpaced growth in GVA. However, of course, the FPP recommend a target of 30% of GVA, and investment growth alone won't be sufficient. The challenge was recognised, as the Deputy said, in the budget, which included a medium to long-term plan to grow the reserve. Under that plan, investment growth was to continue to be reinvested in the reserve, prior year basis taxation debtors to be transferred in 2025, and Pillar 2 receipts over the base forecast to be used to strengthen the reserves, as well as deal with new healthcare facilities programme, and that strategy remains in place. And an updated position will be set out in Budget 2026.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. So what considerations has the Treasury Minister and the Assistant Minister given to the forthcoming government plan to ensure that we achieve a larger public sector surplus to allow transfers to be made to the strategic reserve to increase it as a percentage of gross value added? Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gorse.
So, as the Deputy knows, the government plan is now a whole-of-government approach rather than being the remit of the Treasury Minister and her humble assistant. The reality is that ministers, and we've just heard a minister answer a question, wanting additional funding in their particular department. So the Treasury team make the case for the importance of growing the reserve. There is that strategy in place, and I think we'll be doing jolly well if we manage to maintain that strategy rather than some other calls which may wish to have it used elsewhere.
Deputy Joseph.
So I'm not sure. I think that there's another question on this strategic reserve, but the issue of the GVA, we don't know what the GVA is going to be. And does the Minister, as a previous Treasury Minister and Chief Minister, not recognise that whilst there can be a policy of increasing the strategic reserve, we also need to deal with the short-term issues of the market? And the construction industry is in big trouble. Would he consider actually looking at the long-term issue of GVA and actually allocating money for important projects in the short term that are shovel-ready, like schools and all the other issues, because the construction industry has already failed a lot and we don't want it constraining anymore? GVA will fall.
Deputy Gorse.
So I don't want to be flippant in answer because a growing GVA is incredibly important, and we shouldn't seek to maintain our policy aims by having a declining GVA. That would be nonsensical. The reality is that there is a programme of investment in infrastructure being brought forward, and Treasury is trying to marry, I suppose, three things. Sometimes they don't seem to be in harmony. One is presenting a balanced budget to this Assembly that deals with the downturn in income because of all of the global situations that we are aware of. Ensure that our reserves remain an underpinning strength of public finances, and at the same time make sure that we are finding money to invest in infrastructure. They are quite three difficult priorities to hold in tension. We are doing our best. Council of Ministers right now, and I'll say this in answer to another question, are right now in the midst of holding those policy aims in tension.
Would the Assistant Minister agree that it's even more difficult to deal with the issue of GVA and a strategic reserve when you have inflation increasing, and perhaps he would be better in discussions with the Treasury and Council of Ministers to use RPI-X as a measure of increasing the strategic reserve versus GVA than RPI, because effectively we are seeing, I know he's doing good work in financial services and that's growing part of the economy, but there are headwinds which are looking dangerous, both domestically and internationally, and is the budget going to bring forward not populist, but necessary projects to basically get the long-term increase in GVA up, but spending and not having industries collapse like construction?
Deputy Bulls.
So it's as if the Deputy's been listening to the conversations. That is exactly what we are aiming to do. But as in any budget settlement, there are views which aren't necessarily aligned, and we need to work through those, because it's absolutely clear, and we'll come on to this in answering the next question, it's absolutely clear that the housing market is in dire strait of some form of government intervention. The question is, what will that intervention be? We know also that our infrastructure needs to have an appropriate investment in it, and yet at the same time we sit on over £1 billion in the strategic reserve and over £2 billion in our social security reserve fund, and we've got to ask ourselves, are we investing those reserves in the right asset classes? We've historically always invested them in international off-island asset classes. Is the time now for us to, and I have to be careful how I phrase this, is the time now for us to think about domestic asset classes that will see investment in infrastructure, but also see appropriate return into those funds, therefore maintaining those reserves?
Final supplementary, Deputy Andrews.
Sir, has the Assistant Minister and Treasury Minister considered utilising the strategic reserve for any investment in the island? Thank you, sir.
So I think I just said that that is what Council of Ministers are considering, not a reserve in isolation, but the whole of the reserve. You look across the board and you ask oneself, is it appropriate to now think about an investment strategy for our reserves which invests domestically as well as internationally? We've always had an investment strategy that sought to ensure that we manage the counter-cyclical nature of our economy when we are in such turbulent international waters. The question that comes to my mind logically is we could offset some of that by investing some of our reserves in infrastructure. That doesn't mean spending our reserves, it means having a proper investment with a return into the funds so that the funds are not diminished and they remain for their ultimate purpose, which is about dealing with the ageing demographic and dealing with any catastrophic economic issue that might occur.
Thank you, Assistant Minister. Question 8, Deputy Ozer will put to the Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Will the Assistant Minister advise what consideration, if any, will be given to fostering a balanced housing market and to concerns about rising home rental costs in the preparation of the draft 2026-29 budget?
Assistant Minister.
So I'll read out the prepared answer and then we'll no doubt deal with the underlying question. One of the aims outlined in the government's common strategic policy is to improve the housing market with a focus on increasing the availability of affordable homes for islanders. While the Council of Ministers is still in the early stage of developing the budget for 26 to 29 and has not yet considered any changes to stamp duty, it has identified housing as a key policy priority.
Just to say, we'll have supplementary then questions from Alex Curtis and then Deputy Wilson, and then final supplementary. Deputy Ozer.
Well, sir, the Assistant Minister said the housing market's in dire straits, and he said he was writing off a script. Is it a socialist script, actually, sir? Because aren't we actually now seeing that the truth is now coming out, that the surcharge of 3% which the council themselves brought forward to reduce at 2%, that got thrown out. All my proposals got thrown out, and my worst fears are now coming true. The situation is getting worse. Turnover is still at a 2-decade low. Prices may
Are
be...
you going to answer a question or make a speech?
Yeah, no. So I'm going to say, is the Council of Ministers going to take the issues that are a plunging housing market, no confidence, private sector rentals increasing, rents going up, transactions falling, last week Royal Court saw more Andean things than anything else. Are they going to actually get real and actually speak to real people rather than socialist nonsense?
This is the Minister.
Well, sir, I've never been accused of reading a socialist script. I didn't know my glasses allowed me to read such a script. The Deputy is touching on a most important point in regard to our housing market and the construction sector. For my part, and this is not approved by the Council of Ministers, as I said in answer to my previous question, Council of Ministers are currently navigating those 3 policy priorities, as every Council of Ministers has to do. I voted for an amendment to the Deputy's proposal in the last budget to reduce the surcharge on buy-to-let properties to reduce it to 2%. It is absolutely critical that the supply, I believe, in the private rented market is increased, and the reality is that the surcharges, and some would say this was a good policy outcome, the surcharges had the other effect. Right now, as we sit here, I was informed only last week by a developer who looks carefully at all the prices that there's over 1,800 properties for sale, and the market is not moving. Of course, if we look at the official statistics, we can see a slight uptick in transactions, but as the Deputy said, we have to go beneath the surface of what those transactions are, and are they in the private sector, and I'm not sure that they are. So we need to stimulate what we think of as the chain or the ladder of property. So I would be arguing for changes to the stamp duty surcharge. I know that other ministers will be making that case as well. I'll also be arguing for more thought and actual action to be brought around a downsizing policy. I think the only way you can deal with downsizing is probably through stamp duty changes. Of course, that's quite difficult from a policy perspective, because what is downsizing? Who is going to monitor it? But I, as with colleague ministers, will be strongly making the case that there is now a need for intervention.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And the Minister highlighted the need for affordable homes as a key priority. Is it his view as the Assistant Minister, from a fiscal perspective, that the best model would be a working open housing market where homes were suitably affordable in the open market without the need for such a level of intervention by his department and the wider government?
Assistant Minister.
So I believe passionately in home ownership, and I do so because it gives islanders a hope for the future. It's the fundamental issue around why islanders see no hope and can't see how they can manage to stay in the island unless they've got parental support. We are and have historically had high house prices. The market is now stagnant, prices are coming off, but there is nothing that's stimulating movement within the housing market, so we need to do that. I broadly supported the First Steps scheme introduction because of the fall-off in housing prices and because we needed to do something to stimulate the housing market. If we look at the statistics that come out of that intervention in First Step schemes, I think there are some questions which still haven't been answered. Yes, it's really great that islanders are getting onto the housing market. Fantastic. We all agree with that. The question is it then stimulating activity across the wider market? And I've not yet had satisfactory answers for my part to those questions. And that was the reason why I, when the previous government brought it forward, believed it was an acceptable intervention if prices are off by 20% as they were at the time.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister just go a little further on the difference between having incentives in the market versus a market that functions at the right price? Does he not see a concern that wanting to stimulate the market at its current position risks a challenge that a dropped market drops more people into negative equity, or creates a fear that people don't want falling house prices, which I think most of us realistically do?
Assistant Minister.
Government intervention is always something which has to be undertaken carefully, and we have to review the effects of such intervention so that there aren't the unintended consequences that the Deputy referred to.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. As someone representing St Clement, experiences shared by some constituents are showing that housing transactions are down in our parish and rentals are going up. And some people seem to be saying that the 3% surcharge may be hindering the sales and limiting supply. Pleased to hear the Minister's personal reflections on this, but can he assure us that the Treasury is actually testing the impact of the 3% surcharge? And if so, what conclusions are they reaching on that? And given that he's just explained how he will commit personally to restoring market confidence, is he confident that we will see this commitment demonstrated in the forthcoming budget?
Assistant Minister.
How long is a piece of string? I personally believe that we need to reinstill confidence in the housing market. From all of those involved in it that I speak to, they are most concerned about that confidence. We've seen the effect in the construction industry, and there's a lack of confidence there. And so they are looking to government to consider whether, back to Deputy Alex Kersey's question, to see whether government intervention has had an effect, or can now, by taking the perhaps opposite intervention, have a more positive stimulating effect. Those are conversations that Council of Ministers will continue to have. I am optimistic that ministers will see the need for intervention. But they are, as I say, conversations which we are getting to in the government plan process, and I wouldn't wish to second-guess my colleagues' decisions.
Supplementary. Final supplementary, Deputy Joseph.
Sir, I wanted to circulate the article from The Economist magazine, which warned rental interventions don't work. And I'm pleased to hear the Assistant Minister saying that actually what we tried to do in the budget was right. But do I need to, with the Assistant Minister or other ministers, send them the copy of the article of The Economist to say why it's wrong? And are they going to really take seriously the issues that Deputy Wilson raises and others, that there is now a worse housing crisis? He said so, dire straits, housing market falling 20%. It's actually now surely gone past the point of emergency, and it's self-inflicted. Would he not agree?
Assistant Minister.
Well, so it's difficult to argue that it's self-inflicted. I think it's easier to argue that an intervention made by government previously was perhaps at the wrong time in the cycle of what was happening in housing. But I see others nodding, and they would disagree. And this is the joy of both the Council of Ministers and this Assembly. The point is that we are experiencing not just local headwinds, but global headwinds. And when we see the effects of both international and local headwinds on any sector of the economy, then we've got to ask ourselves, maybe my glasses have turned socialist after all. We've got to ask ourselves, is intervention the right thing for government to do? And I can only at this point think that it is. The arguments will be not just in the budget about what we do with what we do with stamp duty, which I'm looking forward to in our live arguments, but there'll be other proposals around intervention that some of us may think will have an even further detrimental effect upon rental prices in our community. But that will be a debate that this Assembly, will be having in due course.
Thank you, Assistant Minister. Question 9, Deputy Scott, will put to the Chair of PPC. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chair provide 2 examples of cost reduction measures implemented by the State's Gref that have been discussed and officially recorded by the Privileges and Procedures Committee?
Chair.
Thank you, sir. Using the parameters provided by the Deputy in her question, there is one example. For the 2025 budget, PPC agreed to £80,000 of savings identified by the State's Gref through a reduction in the overall budget for the State's members' pension scheme. That additional budget not being required on the basis of the take-up of the scheme. But I would like to point out that any cost reductions which can be made are dependent on the Gref's ability to maintain the service provision for members, especially those which support scrutiny and backbenchers, to provide, as much as practicable, a level playing field with colleagues serving on the executive. Every effort is made to ensure efficient and effective budget management by PPC and the State's Gref, which is demonstrated by underspends against total budget in recent years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. We'll have a supplementary followed by questions from David Tellier and the Connétable of St Brelard. Yes, supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Given that the Gref's revenue expenditure between 2022 and 2024 increased by £2 million to £9,497,000, and its final approved budget for this year was £10,350,000, how does the Chair feel that the impact of the cost savings she's mentioned are working in terms of value for money for the public?
Chair.
Thank you, sir. I do feel that we give very good value for money when you think of all the services which the Gref provides. With Secretariat services, we've taken the youth service under our belt. There have been increases in states, as you say, there has been increases in the State's Assembly budget in recent years. And as I've said, as well as transfers of the State's Gref in respect to the Jersey Youth Parliament and a small amount of funding for a caseworker to support the States of Jersey Complaints Panel, there have been growth bids approved by this Assembly to provide more capacity to service an increased number of government bodies by the Specialist Secretariat team, and to establish a team which now assists elected members for constituency work. Funding was also agreed to address the determination of the State's members' remuneration reviewer. If you see the list of all the services which the Gref provides, it is actually good value for money, and we do look at the budget and we do try to work within our means, but there is a huge call on the Gref. Thank you.
Deputy Tellier.
Would the Chair of PPC give consideration to abolishing the none of the above vote in uncontested elections as a potential area of cost saving?
Chair.
Thank you. I don't think that's actually relevant to the question, sir. Thank you. That's legislation.
So I do think, could we have a ruling on whether it's relevant? I think the question is about cost saving, what areas of cost saving have been identified, and this is a potential suggestion for another area of cost saving, sir. Seems to arise.
The Chair said it's a matter for legislation, a matter of the Assembly, so I think she's correct in giving that answer. Have you a supplementary?
I don't see how I can have a supplementary, sir, if my first question is not valid.
Oh, well, right, there we are. Connétable St Brelard.
Sir, thank you. Would the Chair agree that the services provided by the Gref, not only to scrutiny but backbenchers in the provision of their propositions, backbench propositions, is actually essential and has improved the performance, if I can call it, of the states over the period during which that's been in place? Thank you, sir.
Chair.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with the Constable, and the level of support that backbenchers receive is has really improved over the years, and we do need to be kept on a level playing field with the executive. So yes, I.
Final supplementary, Deputy Scott.
Yes, sir. Given the budgetary pressures that are going all round in all aspects of government, how sustainable is the rate of spending that I've described? And what has the nature of the PPC's discussion been given future budgets for special advisors?
Chair.
Thank you, sir. I do believe that there was a huge call on the Gref, as I've just said, we've taken on the Jersey Youth Parliament, we've taken on caseworkers, we've really improved the constituency, we've improved so much more. And actually, it's been agreed, I think, that the budget that we've asked for has levelled out. And I have actually said that every effort is, as I said in my previous answer, every effort is made to ensure efficient and effective budget management by PPC and the State's Gref, which is demonstrated by underspends against total budget in recent years. So we have had underspends in recent years. So I'm not quite sure what the Deputy is searching for. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Question 10, Deputy Alex Curtis will put to the Chief Minister. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise which ministers and government departments hold information regarding the costs of housing construction in Jersey?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The holding of this sort of data is undertaken by Andium, the States of Jersey Development Company, on our behalf, and they have all of the market intelligence, information and expertise required to ensure competitiveness and value for money. It's worth saying, sir, that the government can call upon and we'll call upon that information whenever we need to. We also have access to suitably qualified professionals when we need such information to support policy and decision making, sir. I do, however, think that understanding the nature of construction costs in Jersey is vital, and I welcome the JCRA's recent review into the competitiveness of the construction sector, and I look forward to seeing their final report in due course.
So we're going to have a supplementary from Deputy Alex Curtis and then questions from Deputy Ozef and Deputy Renouf. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister just suggested that the government does call on its experts who have information on the housing market from time to time, such as SOJDC and Andium. Could he then explain why that information is considered not held by the Government of Jersey when in written questions to both the Treasury Minister and Housing Minister, neither could provide the numbers that would have been provided to them by said expert or state-owned entities?
Chief Minister.
I can't explain that, sir, without make some further inquiries, but just to reiterate, sir, that information is held, sir, by those businesses, so I'll have to look into that. Thank you.
Deputy Ozef.
So yesterday I was speaking to an agent who was investing in property, has been known to be invested in private rental property, and said that now the construction costs of housing is simply too expensive to make it any worthwhile to invest in private rental sector. Has the Chief Minister, in his oversight, and the Economic Development Minister, no, he's the Chief Minister answering this, has he actually pressed the JCRA to do something useful in terms of their construction report, and in including the impact of the flat rate card on the construction industry, because one hears that construction materials are going up, partly because of the, again, well-intentioned policy of a flat rate card, but it's a serious issue.
Chief Minister.
Sir, yes, I believe the JCRA report into the sector will cover that. I can't comment until I've actually seen the report. So in relation to the flat rate card, the flat rate card will work well, but we need that, and that is put in place to attract competition into the marketplace. So there'll be a bit of a lag, I think, until we get that competition. But I'm confident that once that starts to happen, and we'll see the benefits of that across not just the construction sector, but many other aspects of shipping costs into the island.
Supplementary.
I don't want to take up the Assembly's time, but I hope that scrutiny may well be able to do something on the cost of issues in order to help the Council of Ministers in actually their policy formulations. Would you agree that scrutiny should look at the cost of living?
I agree, sir, that yes, scrutiny should scrutinise whatever they see fit to, and they can be assured of the government's support with their efforts. Thank you.
Deputy Renouf.
So, housing costs are a critical factor in driving affordability of housing and the profitability of developers. The tension is between the need for prices to fall for consumers versus the need for developers to keep prices up. So does the Chief Minister think, on the basis of the data that he says the government holds, that we are reaching the point where rising construction costs are meeting falling prices, and whether the solution is to cut construction costs or increase house prices?
Chief Minister.
So I'm not sure I said the government held information. To be clear, ministers are not directly involved in the construction of housing projects that is undertaken by Andium Homes and the States of Jersey Development Company on our behalf. And they have the market intelligence and information expertise required to make sure we deliver value for money. Just to be clear on that, I'm not sure I fully understood Deputy Curtis's supplementary before, but I can speak to him after to clarify the position, sir. I believe we need to, the adage goes, if we do what we've always done, we get what we've always got. That's why we need to be embracing modern methods of construction. Technology in that area is moving forward quickly, sir. And I believe the answer is we have to reduce the cost of building family homes to make them more affordable. We've already started to do that in relation to assist buy schemes, such as Andium has just announced, and the Step Up scheme. I also very much hope, with the piece of work we're doing in relation to the Island Regeneration Programme on affordable housing, we lay out a number of other ideas and opportunities that will facilitate more local families into homes, sir. And we can do that by making sure that the cost of construction is stabilised and doesn't increase exponentially like we've seen in the past.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. I just wonder if I could press the Chief Minister on the question of whether he thinks the point has been reached where falling house prices has reached the rising cost of construction and that there is a danger of schemes not being viable because of that.
Chief Minister.
Sorry, sir, I just missed a couple of words. Could he just clarify? I got to the falling cost of housing.
Would he clarify whether he believes that we have reached the situation where falling house prices are colliding with the rising costs of construction and therefore affecting the viability of schemes?
Well, sir, I think that those two margins are bumping close together, but hopefully that should help to drive down the cost of construction if it creates more competition. And developers are going to have to look for more value from construction, and that's why I think the move to more modern methods of construction would be useful, sir. I think Deputy Gorse made some good and relevant points in relation to the housing market, sir. But we have to be careful. We're in a cycle that we don't want to, that other members alluded, I think Deputy Curtis alluded earlier, that sort of bottoms out, and then we see house prices rising again. Because whilst that might stimulate the market for some people, it won't help our young families buy homes, sir. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Curtis. Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And Deputy Reddiff has hit the nail on the head in that we need to know both the cost of construction and the value of the sale. So, given that Treasury holds that specific and valuable data in the form of the development agreements it sees, will the Chief Minister ensure that members and ministers are briefed on the specific costs of construction facing the island right now, so we can have an informed discussion in here moving forward and not talk in anecdote and vagueness?
Chief Minister.
I think I take some exception to the accusation of giving answers by way of anecdotes, and I would like I withdraw that. But yes, certainly any information we're prepared to share to assist with policy development. And but we need to be specific. The cost of construction is a big question. I mean, it depends on what we're constructing, where we're constructing it, and how we're constructing it. So it's a complex issue. As I say, we're happy to share, and because that's necessary for this Assembly and the government to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Chief.
So could I just confirm that, clarify that that the comment about anecdote and vagueness was the Assembly talks in that, as we don't have the data, it wasn't impugning that view on the Chief Minister in particular as any one member.
Thank you very much. Question 11, Deputy Wall, put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Wall.
Thank you, sir. Further to written question 263/2025 regarding Victoria College's energy, cleaning and grounds maintenance costs, will the Minister explain and evidence his statement that the age-weighted pupil unit, AWPU, for these costs are directly connected to pay inflation and consequently are increased by at least this percentage value?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. The evidence is as follows. In 2025, the budgets for these items increased as the building premises cost budget was increased by 4.4%, giving a total budget in 25 of 261,979 compared to 250,905 in 2024. The cleaning cost budget was increased by 4%, giving a total budget in 25 of 22,474 compared to 21,608 in 2024. And the school will be aware of these. And the grounds cost budget, sir, was increased by 8%, giving a total budget in 25 of £36,029 compared to £33,360 in 2024. The school are aware of these changes, which are set out on the front sheets of the provided annually to the school. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you for that very fulsome answer. Is the new school funding formula supposed to track inflation for all costs?
Sorry, sir, can you just say that again? I didn't quite get the last one.
It's a very simple sentence. Is the new school's funding formula supposed to track inflation for all costs?
It may. The school funding formula is a complex model, but the Victoria College is not funded by the school funding formula. It's still funded by the ALPU. And this question is about Victoria College, sir.
Thank you. Question from Deputy Joseph.
About the
brief question, then back to Deputy Wall for a final supplementary.
Is the school given the ability to actually decide what sort of fuel to use in their heating oil? I was told by a maintenance manager of this school, or one of the schools, that they are forced to get green diesel, which is actually much more expensive, and they prefer spend the money on their staff and on their maintenance costs.
So I'd have to find out the answer to that outside of here. It's sort of somewhat away from the question. But obviously our commitment to lowering our carbon emissions is also important. So I don't know the answer to that, sir.
Thank you.
So he doesn't know the answer to the question about whether all his schools are using green diesel at a massive public cost.
Victoria College, I think.
Sir, absolutely correctly. I don't, off the top of my head, know whether they're using green diesel. In fact, sir, in addition to that, I don't know what type of boiler they have, what type of supply they have, or what their voltage is for their boiler, the sort of output of their boiler, or indeed how many radiators they have in the school. But if the Deputy wants that information, which seems to me somewhat pointless, we can find it for him, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Final supplementary from Deputy Wall.
No, thank you, sir.
Question 12, Deputy Moore will ask of the Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Although I note that the Attorney General is in the Assembly.
Yes, the question will be asked by the Solicitor, yes.
Following the publication of the Violence Against Women and Girls Annual Progress Report, will the Attorney General explain why recommendation 4 regarding the publication of guidance on the application of the new offence of domestic abuse that was established by the Domestic Abuse Law 2022 in June 2023, in particular concerning what behaviour constitutes coercive control and controlling behaviour, has not yet been implemented?
Solicitor General.
So a draft of the guidance is due to be completed this Friday. Assuming it's in order, I anticipate it will be. It should be published on the Attorney's webpage shortly thereafter. The guidance will not only make clear, in accordance with recommendation 4 of the report, what kinds of behaviour constitute coercive and controlling behaviour, it will also make clear that economic abuse is covered within the offence of domestic abuse in line with recommendation 26, and will provide a definition of immigration abuse in accordance with recommendation 51. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Will the Solicitor General be able to explain why it has taken 2 years to achieve this?
Well, the progress report itself recognises that it was a work in progress. I'm quoting from page 18 under the recommendations I've just mentioned, which states that by agreement the Law Officers Department will be reporting on the progress of the above recommendations separately. It is a question, as with most departments, of priorities. Yes, undoubtedly, issuing public guidance on this topic is very important, but so too, and possibly more so, is prosecuting cases of domestic abuse. In the 24 months since the law came into force, the department has brought 16 prosecutions for domestic abuse, 14 of which involved coercive and controlling behaviour. Of course, domestic abuse is only one aspect of violence against women and girls. The department has been ever more involved and engaged in prosecuting serious sexual offending against women and girls over the last several years. Indeed, I'm just looking at the Legal Information Board. 2 rape cases were sentenced last month. A third was sentenced the month before, a fourth in March. So there's always room for improvement, madam, but the department has not been sitting on its hands where addressing violence of women against girls is concerned.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, madam. One of the findings of the Vaughan report was about changing the culture of misogyny that is so prevalent in Jersey. Does the Solicitor General agree that recommendations are a key element to changing this culture? And would he agree that guidelines for people working in law enforcement, including the honorary police, around coercive and controlling behaviour should have been put further up the priority list?
Putting them further up the priority list, as I say, there's always room for improvement. And if they could have been done earlier, well, perhaps they should have been. But of course, we recognise in the department the importance of all those working in law enforcement understanding the dynamics of domestic abuse and controlling behaviour, and guidelines in that sense are important, as indeed is the Vaughan exercise that we're all engaged in.
Supplementary, Deputy Miles.
Thank you. What training does the Attorney General and his department provide to users of the guidelines? And does he undertake any research to understand the impact?
Well, if I understand the question, we don't give training to members of the public, but we do have training for our lawyers, and that occurs on a regular basis. And it's conducted by and overseen by some often really very experienced criminal lawyers in this field from England and Wales. One is talking about King's Counsel and people who are leaders in their field. So within the department, it is, I hope members will understand, taken enormously seriously. And we are always very keen to improve the quality of the service we're able to provide.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, ma'am. What stakeholders were involved in the drafting of this guidance, please, or indeed, and what experts were involved? And how will this guidance be kept under review?
Well, the guidance has had input from leading counsel in England. How will it be kept under review? I don't know at the moment the answer to that, but it will be kept under review. And I issue this invitation now to members. It will be a public document. If members of the Assembly want to express views on it, we're always willing to listen and take that into account. So I encourage that if members feel sufficiently about it that they want to engage with us.
Supplementary, Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, ma'am. Would the Solicitor General commit to setting a date, perhaps in a year's time or 2 years' time, to review this guidance to see if it is being effective, and to include local stakeholders and indeed experts in coercive control and controlling behaviour in this review?
Well, that's a matter I'll raise with the Attorney General, but I'm not able, I think, to say that for myself.
Final supplementary, Deputy Moore.
Thank you, ma'am. What regular interaction does the Attorney General and Solicitor General have with the relevant minister in order to assist them with defining their priorities in work and also setting KPIs with regard their delivery of reports and recommendations?
Well, I know that the Attorney has reasonably regular meetings with the Minister for Home Affairs. I myself have not been involved in those, and I'm not sure I can assist further in terms of the extent of his involvement.
Very well, we move to question 13, which Deputy Catherine Curtis of St Helier Central will ask of the Minister for Children and Families.
Thank you, ma'am. Will the Minister advise what consideration, if any, he has given to an island-wide strategy to protect children from the various forms of online harm? And if he has given no consideration, will he explain why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And of course, we are giving consideration to an online a strategy to cover online harm. Of course, there are also many other harms that, of course, are not online, and we have to consider those as well. But when considering a strategy, we have to consider that today children are increasingly, their lives are shaped by their digital experiences. Whether it's social media, gaming, or online learning, the online world is now a fundamental part of childhood. That brings opportunities but also risks, ranging from exposure to harmful content and cyberbullying to exploitation and online addiction. A cross-ministerial group has now been established to coordinate the approach and develop a strategy on this matter, including any considerations arising from the scrutiny panel's review. I believe that this group will focus on actions, offer a timely and important focus point for government and an evolving area of policy development. My focus in this is to ensure families are effectively supported to navigate those challenges in the short term, rather than working on any other strategy. I accept that in order to develop our medium and future term approach to this policy issue, we need a sustainable strategic approach. Any future strategy must avoid duplication of existing work and be agile enough to keep pace with rapidly evolving technology. It must also balance child protection with young people's rights to freedom, expression and digital access. I recognise there are other challenges to overcome that coincide with this issue, for example, alternatives to screens and mobiles in the shape of play spaces, and I hope the play strategy will help in this aspect. Our new, sorry sir.
You've reached nearly 2 minutes,
yes,
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, supplementary, Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. So just to confirm, as the Children's Minister, will the Minister say whether he is supportive of an island-wide strategy to protect children from online harm?
So absolutely I'm supportive of such a strategy, and as I say, that is likely to be developed with a number of other ministers, but I am 100% supportive of that. I've certainly also looked at what is developing in other jurisdictions, in particular, Australia's move to a ban on social media for the under-16s, and how other European nations are actually tackling that as well. Thank you.
Question from Deputy Miles only, and then back to Deputy Catherine Curtis for a final supplementary. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Minister, the 2017 Independent Jersey Care Inquiry highlighted that Jersey had historically lagged behind other jurisdictions in updating child protection laws. How is the Minister ensuring that online safety legislation isn't similarly delayed?
Minister.
Well, I think the main, now that we've established a cross-ministerial group, that we are able to focus work with the Economic Development Minister to ensure that there are not delays. As I say, if I believe there were delays, then I would obviously wish to take action to prevent any blockages. But I want to see legislation as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Final supplementary, Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for his answer. So, while there are huge benefits from the online world, does the Minister appreciate that there are dangers which need a coordinated approach from parents, schools and government too, and that a strategy could pave the way forward?
Minister.
Yes. Sorry. Yes, I mean, I think a strategy is extremely important. We must help families and the children themselves deal with these online issues. What's always at the front of my mind in these things is that once a child or young person has seen a disturbing image, that can be never removed from their mind. And I think that's particularly important when we start to consider whether there should be a block on social media, for instance. I have my own personal view on that. I need to speak to other ministers, but my personal view is that I think we will have to, through the owners of these platforms, certainly bring in some restrictions on social media. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Question 14, Deputy Alex Curtis will put to the Minister of the Environment. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether a building application for the South Hill development has been submitted, and if so, the current status of the application?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So I can confirm that at this time a building application has not been submitted for the South Hill development.
Supplementary? No. Question 15, Deputy Wilson will put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether there are any challenges in placing children with special educational needs in their catchment preferred school from next term? And if so, how such challenges are being addressed?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. Just a couple of things, just to give a context to this. The allocation of non-fee-paying primary school places is undertaken by Education Centrally, and it is based upon a set of criteria. The top of that criteria is having a special educational need and access to a specific school. But within schools, there are additional resource provision centres. So I have an awful lot of data. I'll pick out some of the data. There are challenges, but what's happened is there is flexibility in the allocation of places to children to meet their need. And what that means is there is one person reception who's been placed in a special school which is not in their catchment area in order to meet their need. There are two that have been placed in an ARP secondary school which is not in their catchment area school based on the school having a specialist nurture provision to meet their needs. And there are, and I want to make sure this information is accurate, two pupils are being required to remain in the mainstream where a bespoke provision is being provided. So there are challenges of our increasing need. However, sir, I think the flexibility in the provision and the way in which schools are stepping up to the plate in terms of the ARPs and what their provision and accepting children is meeting that need virtually completely, but we can always do more. Obviously, if we build the school in Gas Place, which will have a specialist school attached to it, we will have more provision. That could have been ready by this year if it hadn't been delayed. But that's just a personal gripe of my own, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. Alongside concerns about placement capacity for these children, there have been ongoing reports of staffing shortages and delays in recruitment in educational psychologists in particular. And as we know, these are particularly vital for timely assessments and the support planning that the Minister just alluded to. Can he state what impact these delays and gaps in service are having on placement decisions? And in cases where a child cannot be placed, could he just explain what alternative placement options are available to ensure their needs are being met?
Minister. So that's a very, very wide-ranging question. In terms of meeting the challenges, as I mentioned, and specialist provision and adaptive provision will be made for young people in schools. There is refurbishment of the Passwell Secondary, which I'm sure will be ready in this October. Part of it we're hoping may be ready earlier, but I get very suspicious when I hope things, then they end up not happening, sir. In terms of other areas, there are some issues around some areas of provision that are being solved at the moment in terms of educational psychology, so I think we can come to a conclusion to that relatively soon and improve that service. The other issues around recruitment are not new. There will always, I think, be issues around recruitment. However, I think making some changes in our provision, for example, to being able to lease somewhere to live for particular groups could also help with that provision. I know there's work going on regards, and I can't remember the words for it, sorry, because it's not my specialist area, population, but enabling people to be here and actually have, be able to rent across our sectors. That's the key.
Supplementary from Deputy Miles only. This Minister is, of course, answering further questions without notice later on this morning. Deputy Miles.
Okay, thank you. Just following on from the previous answer, given the totally unsatisfactory situation with the Educational Psychology Service, what reassurance can the Minister give to parents of children with special needs that those needs have been and will be properly assessed, and therefore their children will be allocated to the most suitable provision to meet those needs?
So this has turned into a question about educational psychologists. If you think that's okay, then I can do that.
Well, no, if it's beyond the question, then...
I mean, I think the comment made by the Deputy that it's a totally unsuitable provision, I think is unfair. There have been problems. However, the service has continued. The assessment, the past academic year, wait time for assessment was 55 days, and the current academic year is down to 19 days. So there has been mitigating circumstances to get that service continuing. Of course, it's not perfect, and we don't want it to be the way it is, but an enormous amount of work has gone in to try and fix that problem. And so, yes, so I'm as confident, I think, as I can ever be that the assessments are happening. Are they ever happening as quick as we want them to? Probably not, and we'll continue to work towards that in the best way we possibly can.
Thank you, sir. What extra support has been provided to schools to meet the needs of children who should be in special education but need to stay in an inappropriate provision because Montalabé is full?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, specialist provision. I mean, each case is a particular provision, so I couldn't go through each individual case, and I'm also not a specialist in that area, so I wouldn't necessarily know what that provision would be. But I know schools are working as they always do, and I think we should give some credit to our schools, and that will be a theme of my answers today, if possible, to give credit to schools for the work that they're doing in this area. And also, yes, of course, we want to expand provision as much as we possibly can. That is a difficult situation. I will say that Montalabé, I personally think, in the next few years, will need to be larger than we originally thought. And so actually the delay in that could be beneficial in the long term, that we actually build something that is more suitable so we don't end up in this position of not having enough places because of the change in demographic and what's happening with children later on in a few years' time. So I'm hoping there can at least be some positives that come from that. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Wilson, final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. And I would just like to pay tribute to those teachers who are delivering special educational needs education. It's a very, very challenging area of professional practice. I just wanted to ask, the Minister just alluded to the fact that we need some expansion. If demand does continue to exceed the capacity, does he only expect that a school is the solution? Is there anything else that we can expect to see from ministers and officers from within his department to improve things like placement processes and the support provided to children with these needs?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. We have, for example, recently opened the word facility sounds wrong to me, but a provision, so I'm looking for, called Switch, which is an intervention provision for young people who are really struggling and need that additional need. That is a response to this increasing need that we have. So things are happening. The provision that is made within schools themselves is also increasing where we can, and I think the way in which needs are being addressed is also being provided. I will say that I think I'm pleased that the Deputy was talking about the work from teachers and support assistants and teaching assistants in the area of special educational needs. But I would extend that across our schools because so much need is met by ordinarily available provision day to day by adaptation of what's going on in schools across our school estate as well. So increasingly students are being reintegrated into schools who can actually access education. I personally think we do need a separate provision to be developed. We need a greater provision to be developed, which is the step between perhaps those children who need the intense support from Montalave and those who will respond to additional resource provision within schools. But I think an additional provision which is desperately needed in the coming years should be provided for those students that fall within that gap, because then we can get those students back on track and back into education and back to succeeding so they're ready for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Minister. Question 16, Deputy Ward will put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister state whether any funding gap exists between the allocated budget and the contracts negotiated by his department in relation to cleaning and ground costs for Victoria College and Victoria College Preparatory School? And if so, advise whether any additional funding has been allocated to bridge the gap.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I mentioned earlier the funding figures. We'll come back to it again. So the Victoria College budget allocation is from the ALPU, so they receive 47% of the ALPU. It doesn't make discrete provision for contract costs within the overall categories of premises and grounds. It points to areas of money that should be spent. And it is the school's responsibility to allocate their budget from all of their income streams to meet their commitments and priorities. That's the challenge that the head teacher has. I will also say that over 90% of the budget that's given to them is on staffing. And so the decisions around staffing, how many staff, what responsibility points, are all delegated to the head teacher. So there is a decision to be made within the school as well, regards these contracts and the cost themselves.
Deputy Ward.
Sure. Can the Minister confirm if the move to the SFF for the fee-paying schools will see an uplift to ensure that their fixed or semi-fixed costs are adequately supported and reflect the real costs for those schools? And if not, why not, as this cost discrepancy is already known by the department as they've negotiated the contracts?
Minister. Thank you, sir. Is the Deputy referring to the funding formula, may I ask? We move to a funding formula.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the discussions on that are already ongoing. The funding formula will have an effect on what that will be according to the intake of schools. I will say that analysis of 2025 budget allocations indicates that the Victoria College receive a total funding from the ALPU and school fees that is, for Victoria College, 41% higher than they would receive if they were fully funded by governments receiving the funding formula. So the funding formula for our mainstream schools is very limited. At the moment, if they were on the funding formula, it must be understood that they would receive much higher funding than our schools. Subsequently, I think they have a budget which they could be looking at very carefully in terms of how they spend it.
Thank you, Minister. We have 6 questions left and only 20 minutes for them to be responded to. So I regret to say that only the questioner will be able to ask questions, and of course he or she will have a supplementary as well. Question 17, Deputy Dublé will put to the Chair of the States Employment Board.
Thank you, Sir. Will the Chair please advise how the Government is supporting States employees who are experiencing symptoms of menopause, perimenopause or conditions such as PMDD, PCOS and endometriosis?
Thank you, sir. With the permission of the Deputy Ferry, the Vice Chair of the Board will answer the question.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. So government employees experiencing menopausal symptoms or the other conditions that the Deputy outlines are encouraged to talk to the line manager or the wellbeing team to ensure appropriate support can be made available. This includes provision of flexible working and, if needed, a referral to our occupational health service. Support is available for all employees experiencing these symptoms who have a medical condition through the 24/7 Employee Assistance Programme, which is called Be Supportive, and through the Health at Hand, which provides them with direct access to a medical professional to discuss their concerns. The Government continues to progress support and understand through building an open and inclusive culture to normalising menstruation in the workplace through supportive discussions and open dialogue. This is not only key in supporting States employees, but acts as a model for the private sector. The government is a committed menopause-friendly employer, having signed the employer pledge and has implemented things like continuous face-to-face online events to promote awareness around menopause. We've championed inclusive culture and changing sexism and ageism and derogatory comments by publishing articles on OurGov around menopause and women's experiences and testimonials. And we've updated our sickness absence policy with a new code for menopause, and we've created menopause guidelines for leaders and employees.
Supplementary?
Is there a policy for all of the conditions mentioned in my initial question? How are these policies communicated to employees across the states of Jersey? Are these policies being implemented consistently for different types of employees in different workplaces?
Vice Chair.
Yes, sir. I thank the Deputy for that additional question. Yes, the policies are universal across those conditions that the Deputy mentions. We are also fortunate in the health team to have an expert on endometriosis in particular, who's worked for the Oxford Care Centre for endometriosis. So we have the expertise available in Jersey. We also have training has taken place for menopause and mental health, myths around menopause, menopause and nutrition, and there are lots of other initiatives going around the whole of the states to highlight the issue and to point people who are experiencing symptoms in the right direction for help, sir.
Sir, could the Minister respond to the part of my question? How are these policies communicated to all employees?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, sir. Through the relevant leaders of each of the sections where people work, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Question 18, Deputy Andrews will put to the Chief Minister.
I also have a question.
Sorry, forgive me. Sorry, did you want to say something? Forgive me.
I was still having a question, but...
Yes, perhaps you missed me. I said that in view of the fact that we've got 6 questions left and only 20 minutes, we'll only have time for the questioner and their supplementary question. Yes, Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise whether it is his assessment that there remains a need to streamline government services? And further to response to written question 257/2025, will he explain how the government is addressing the unsustainable level of running costs?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I do believe there is still a need to perhaps streamline and reprioritise public services and certain aspects of the civil service, whilst ensuring we fully protect our frontline provision, which is what we have been doing. So members will know we have seen a 2,000 increase in roll since 2018 and an almost a 50% increase in the cost of running the public sector. Spend on our arm's length bodies and grants have more than doubled to 71 million in the same period, sir. If we had not introduced a recruitment freeze in August last year and growth had continued as it was before, there'd be likely that there'd be an additional approximately 325 staff, which officials estimate would cost an additional £23 million a year. So members will also remember that we removed 1,000 vacancies from the system. In the past 6 months, we've seen total roles begin to stabilise. So with only 44, 44 FTE total rise despite 76 FTEs more posts in healthcare Jersey, which indicates that the back office departments are starting to reduce. Consultancy and temporary staffing spend has dropped by 29 million in 2024 over 2023. And we're expecting this to continue, sir. So there is a Rolling Stone song, the words say you can't always get what you want. I won't sing it, but if you try sometimes, well, you might actually get what you need, sir. And that's what this government is trying to do. It's trying to make sure we have what we need and what we want, because what this Assembly wants and what government wants is not always what we need. So having said that, I want to pay tribute to the public sector. We have a very professional and robust public sector. And with reprioritisation, we want to keep it that way, so working in the best interests of islanders. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Is the Chief Minister of the view that there is a need to maintain the current level of headcount, or is he of the view that headcount ought to be reduced, and if so, by how much? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
It's a piece of work we're carrying out now. We're examining services right across the board. I certainly would draw a line in the sand and say we don't need to increase headcount. I think we can reprioritise and reduce headcount in certain areas. By how much, it's hard to say, sir. But I think we can make ourselves a little more streamlined and more productive, sir, and we need to try and hold that position in the years ahead.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Question 19, Deputy Gardner will put to the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Further to discussions at the meeting of the Older Person Living Forum on the 19th of June 2024, will the Minister advise what progress, if any, has been made on the cross-government project to implement a form of identification cards through the parishes as an alternative form of identification to a passport or driving licence?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I had a very broad and wide-ranging discussion with the Older Persons Living Forum, and I recall that one of the issues raised was people were concerned that if they hadn't updated their passport or their driving licence, then they may be left without access to services because of lack of photo ID. So following on from that conversation, I did undertake to get assurance from my department about the processes that we follow within employment, social security and housing. And I was pleased that processes were already in place to ensure that the lack of formal identification wasn't a barrier. So customers will be asked a series of security questions instead to prove their ID. Also, further to that, in 2024, a non-passport solution was also set up for Jersey Me, so that people without a passport can still set up a digital ID and access government services online.
Supplementary.
Would the Minister agree, first of all, I congratulate the Minister that her department is dealing well, but would the Minister agree that recognizable alternative ID, it's not a matter of convenience, it's actually dignity and access, and elderly people who cannot get driving license longer and don't need passport to travel because they don't, but they still need form of ID, would require alternative, and who is she thinking, in her view, should be responsible to take this project forward?
Minister.
I do agree that having an ID is important. However, I know from my own family circumstances that my own parents and parents-in-law have outdated passports and driving licences that they still use as photo ID. Since the conversation I had at the Older Persons Living Forum, and I do have to say there were more pressing matters raised at that meeting, nobody has actually raised this as a further issue with me, so it hasn't been progressed as a priority. And as I said in my answer to the first question, I am assured that people without photo identification can indeed access the services that they need within my department and my remit as Minister for Social Security.
Thank you, Minister. Question 20, Deputy Ozef will put to the Chief Minister. Deputy Ozef.
Thank you, sir. Will the, given the multiple strands of cross-government policy in relation to prescription and manufacture of medicinal cannabis in the island, will the Chief Minister commit to providing a consolidated update on the industry, including its performance, regulation and oversight? If so, by when?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The government is committed to providing a report on activities related to medicinal cannabis in Jersey. This will be produced by the end of 2025. As confirmed in my response to Deputy Ozef's written question 285, sir. The report will include details of actions being taken by the relevant minister, so these include the Health Minister, whose portfolio includes licensing, by the Chief Pharmacist, the Economic Development Minister with regard to the development and growth of the cannabis sector and potential of the biotech industry, and the Environment Minister, so whose involvement relates to independent regulation of cannabis clinics, sir, under planning and cannabis cultivation company, sir.
Supplementary?
I was grateful, and I genuinely mean grateful, to the Chief Minister for his courteous response to my written question after quite a to and fro as to why I wanted to put it to him. And I welcome the fact that this report is coming. That is to be welcomed. One doesn't want to be critical, one wants to be positive, but one needs the evidence. I would ask the Chief Minister very politely, I did ask him this question, I think, in January, about whether a report be provided. We've got the budget coming up, and there may need to be some money for regulation in the Health Department and some decisions. Could he please, it's 6 months away, I wonder whether he could bring forward that. We've now got the commitment to a report. Could he bring it forward so that we can have that informed discussion in advance of the budget, as I think it might help the Council of Ministers and backbenchers?
I'll certainly discuss the matter, sir, with the relevant ministers, but I would also reiterate that any regulatory costs should be borne by the industry itself, sir, and that's what we would be minded to do when dealing with that issue. But I'll speak to the relevant ministers, so I hear where the deputy is coming from. We do need a report. We do need to take stock across the sector, so we're going to do that.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Question 21, Deputy Scott, put to the President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Will the President state the number and type of special advisors engaged by scrutiny panels from 2022 to date, including whether they were retained for a single project or on an ongoing general retainer? And will she also provide the total cost of such expertise?
President.
Scrutiny engaged with expert advisors on a regular basis, both paid and unpaid. From the beginning of the current Assembly term in 2022 to date, a total of 5 separate contracts have been entered into on behalf of scrutiny panels in order to engage expert advisors to provide independent, specialist technical advice to that panel during the course of 5 reviews. The contracts have been with 5 different companies or individuals. The total expenditure of this engagement total is £62,025. These advisors are appointed on project-specific base, and scrutiny has not engaged any advisors on a general retainer.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. What is the GREF budget for special advisors to scrutiny panels for this year? Has the Scrutiny Liaison Committee been involved in agreeing it, and was there any underspend last year?
The total budget for this year is 200. It was underspent last year. I don't have a number in front of me. I'm happy to follow it up.
Thank you very much. And question 22, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Renouf.
Further to the response to written question 272/2025, will the Minister advise what discussions, if any, she has had with Ports of Jersey regarding the recent restructure and state whether it is her assessment that the restructure has been successful?
Assistant Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Minister was briefed on the planned restructure, and as part of the cycle of quarterly shareholder meetings with Ports of Jersey is briefed on their ongoing progress. It's evident from the response to written question 272 of this year that an organisational restructure of this nature takes a significant amount of time to plan, implement and then finally evaluate. Accordingly, the Minister regards it as being too early in the process to provide a full assessment of the success of the restructure.
Supplementary?
Yes, I wonder if you'll allow extra supplementaries if we've caught up a little bit with the, with the timings. Last year, the CEO of Ports of Jersey received a bonus of £120,000, more than 40% of his annual salary. Does the Minister think this was appropriate, given that the year ended with a botched management reorganisation which led directly to the airport being put into special attention on December the 10th?
Assistant Minister.
So that really is difficult for me to answer on behalf of the Minister. The questioner will know when I was Minister, I was perturbed by the structuring of bonuses and the size of bonuses in arm's lengths organisation. I know that the Minister herself is exercised by those bonuses and their structuring thereof. I don't think I'm in a position to add anything further than that.
Well, we have in fact completed all the questions. There are 4 minutes left, and Deputy Joseph, do you want to ask a supplemental question?
I know the Minister is...
on.
yes, please. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Well done on your timing today, so brilliant, if I may say. So the Minister is conflicted because obviously he's external relations, and he's basically said that there is need for concern, as the Deputy Renniff has raised. Is it not the case that Ports of Jersey seem to be more of a property company than an airport and doing safety issues, and that there is concern amongst members, and there is more than anecdotal evidence to suggest that there is a botched management reorganisation, and that is actually the cause of the recent problems at the airport? And does the Minister not need to exert some grip on this issue, as difficult as that is, because it's 3 ministers involved?
Minister.
Well, so the Deputy is quite right. It's difficult for me to answer questions directly on the opinion that the Treasury Minister might have, because I have what might be seen by some as a conflicting hat around civil aviation. I have answered questions in that regard, and I'm sure if the Minister were here in person, she would talk about the improved service, getting islanders through security in a shorter period of time than previously, bags onto carousels. Of course, as Minister of External Relations, I am fundamentally concerned about the security and safety of the airport. In hindsight, would the restructuring have taken place in the way that it did without the perhaps necessary time? Then I think in hindsight we would say no. When it comes to whether the Ports of Jersey is a property development company, as members know, I think we called it the red line at the time, was drafted around certain parcels of land to seek to ensure that Ports of Jersey didn't need to keep coming back to the Assembly and the taxpayers to fund the investment in necessary facilities. Is that working as well as we in this Assembly might have anticipated at the time? I fear that at best is an open question.
That brings that period of questions to an end. We now move to questions without notice. The first Minister to answer questions is the Minister for Children and Families, and the first question is from Deputy Jurat.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure we all welcome the Minister for Education's announcement this week about smartphone-free schools. And will the Children's Minister be extending this approach to other children's settings that are subject to safeguarding and equity, such as the youth service sessions or for sports clubs?
Minister.
Thank you. Online safety is something that I take extremely seriously, and we just actually had a question on the strategy. I certainly would, I think we need to look at I think we need to decide on a strategy and whether we actually need to put further restrictions on where young people can use on phones, or whether that's the content that we need to look at. But if I believe there was a need that there were restrictions required to restrict the use of the phones themselves in any of our establishments, then I would certainly act on that. Thank you.
Supplementary, Deputy Joan.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm if he has spoken to the youth service or to members of those who put on sports to actually see what their experiences are with trying to put on these services while at the same time having children being very focused on their phones rather than interactive sessions and enjoyment of the actual services they've been put on? And would he commit to do this?
Minister.
I certainly have spoken to the youth service about the use of phones. Of course, many of the activities they undertake effectively divert children from using phones during those activities. They don't actually supply any devices on which children can actually access social media. I will commit certainly to speak to them again and see if there's anything further that they believe needs to be done. Thank you.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister update the Assembly on the proposed Town Youth Centre, and can you give a timeline for its completion? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you for that. The Youth Centre, of course, is an important part of our strategy for young people. And I would say, connected to the last question, that it is one of those places that will divert children from the use of social media and the use of phones. Where we are at the moment is that plans have been developing well for the Town Youth Centre, and a planning application was submitted on the 17th of April to the Planning Department. We've been provided with a target date for the decision of the 28th of July this year. Of course, that doesn't mean that will be a positive outcome. They could be rejected. If planning approval is granted, then the next steps are to submit the building control application, for a building contract to be developed and agreed, and hopefully to start works by December 2025. If the planning application is rejected, then further consideration will need to take place, and of course that will be a further delay to the project. Subject to that planning approval in July 2025, we're still pushing for the completion of Belmont House, which will house the new Youth Inquiry Service by December 2026, and the completion of the Youth Centre by Q1 to Q2 2028. Thank you.
Supplementary, Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Has the buildings and land, including Belmont House, now been purchased by the government, or is the Minister still awaiting funding? Thank you.
Minister.
As yet, the site is not in our hands. We're waiting the planning decision. If approval is granted, then we will move to purchase the site from the current owners, and that will allow the developer to start groundworks, and hopefully in December 2025.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. In answer to a written question, the Minister told us that Oakwell Children's Short Breaks Home costs approximately £1 million per annum to run, but accommodates only 14 children, most of whom are entitled to a fixed one-night-only respite break per week. What plans does the Minister have to maximise the potential of Oakwell by utilising the home during the day and for 7 nights per week to increase the flexibility of the resource and provide a better service to families?
Minister.
Of course, we would like to extend the use of the home and to have greater use of the facilities. That, of course, is for that, of course, we need resources. Sadly, one of the areas where we are particularly short of staff is in the residential homes, where we have a shortfall of some 35%. However, I will continue to look at how we can make greater use and offer more facilities. It is something that I've considered quite important. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you. In May 2025, the Minister told the scrutiny panel that a report was completed for short breaks in 2024, but that it was not released, and that a more comprehensive report will now not be completed until 2026. Given the extensive need there is amongst families, could the Minister please tell us why the original report was not released and why it's taking so long to provide a further review?
Minister.
I have to say that I am not entirely certain why the 2024 report was not released, and I would need to go back to the office to establish that. I am well aware of the need for these facilities, and I will ask those to see actually if the 2026 whether the 2026 deadline can in any way be brought forward.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I'm advised officers have already produced a range of design briefs for the redevelopment of Liskeay Youth Club for consideration by the Minister and awaiting a decision from him. Can he confirm when the design brief will be signed off? Who will sign it? When the procurement strategy for the development will be finalised? And can he also clarify whether the total budget allocated for the development remains at 7.5 million and if consideration will be given to uplifting the financial allocation in line with inflation when the scheme is approved?
Minister.
This is in the Liskeay Youth Centre is obviously in the hands of my assistant minister. However, I was unaware that we had reached the stage of design briefs. My latest update is that the officers are starting a review of the original business case for Liskeay Youth Centre and starting conversations with Jersey Property Holdings on the pro scheme. The budget for the Liskeay Centre will of course be very subject to the outcome of that review. So actually putting a figure on it at the moment, I would not put a figure on it at the moment, as actually that could also be commercially sensitive. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. In this assembly, we've had previous undertakings that there is still a commitment to the development of Liskeay. Can the Minister confirm that this remains the case? And will he undertake to progress the scheme as soon as possible? And in the interim, can he tell us what repair work will be undertaken before 2028 and when it will be carried out?
Minister.
Right, I can absolutely say that we are committed to the redevelopment of the Liskeay Youth Centre. That is, of course, the Town Youth Centre, as we've said on a number of times, has to be developed first, because it is likely that any redevelopment of the Liskeay Youth Centre would mean that it was no longer suitable for use during that period. And of course, the children in the Liskeay area, if the youth centre in town is available, would be able to move there. So it is important.
Can I raise a point of order, please?
We'll wait till the end of the answer. Well, let's see. Do you want a ruling from the chair now?
Yes.
Yes, what's the matter you want to raise, Deputy?
Sir, this is repetition. We've had this time and time again. What I'm seeking from the Minister is what is actually going to happen about the development of Liskeay. We all understand that it's
Well, you've
in
wanted
a
confirmation
sequence
that
of events,
that's still on their agenda, and he's confirmed that. What else do you want confirmation of in your question?
the repair work, and if there is going to be any repair work before 2028.
Yes. That was the last.
Well, of course, I had to get to the repair work because I was asked to confirm if it was still on our agenda. So I believe I answered that correctly.
Do you want to complete your answer?
I'm surprised that, yes, there is repair work planned. If you want the details of that repair work, I'm happy to get that for you. As I say, I don't have the details of the repair work in front of me or with me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's, just so members know, it's Deputy Ward, then Deputy Doublé, then Deputy Renouf, then Deputy Gardner on my list. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. In the CAMS annual report 2024, the number of individuals open to CAMS at the end of 24 was 1,949. Can the Minister indicate what the budget is allocated by his department for handling this number of individuals?
Minister.
Yes, you're correct in saying that there were 1,422 referrals during 2023 and 2024. I don't actually have the overall CAMS budget, so I'm sorry that I can't provide that. What I can say is that we're currently looking at whether we can put an extra £280,000 towards additional staff to help with the backlog, particularly in the for neurodiverse assessments. But I'm happy to get that information for you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that answer, and I look forward to receiving that information. So just to carry on a similar theme, in the same report, the Minister states that the number of staff employed was 75 at the end of 2024. Can the Minister indicate what that equates to in annual employment cost?
So what was the question again?
Sorry.
Repeat the end of the question, I didn't hear it, sorry.
Yeah. It's in the same report, the Minister states that the number of staff employed was 75 at the end of 2024. Can the Minister indicate what that equates to in annual employment cost?
Well, I think that's a question that requires statistical information. It's unreasonable to expect the Minister to be able to provide without notice, unless you know the answer to that question.
No, I don't. It's similar to the other one. I would have to obtain that information.
That's not a reasonable question to ask the Minister without notice. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Following the recent constructive meeting that the Minister attended with myself and other stakeholders for same-sex parental rights, could he please explain to the Assembly and the public the measures that he is taking to bring the law into force sooner via the legitimacy law?
Minister.
Thank you for that. And I would say that thank you very much for noting the very constructive meeting I had with Liberator and yourself, and I thank you for that. To bring in the legislation, I am intending to do that by ministerial decision, which would bring things forward by 4 weeks, if that is acceptable to the Assembly, and that is the means by which I intend to bring the legislation. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for his answer. In terms of the other measures that are needed to bring the law into force, the practical measures, has the Minister sought any recent updates as to whether this is all on track? If not, will he seek to do this and update the Assembly, please?
Yes, as you know, in preparation for the meeting, I did double check where we were, although I have been kept advised during the period. We are on track for the autumn of this year, and I cannot, at this point, I know of no reason why we won't be able to meet that deadline. Thank you.
That completes the first period allotted to questions without notice. The second period is for questions to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. And the first question is from Deputy Doublé, then Deputy Gardner, then Deputy Balish, then Deputy Wilson. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. This is with regards to the previous question I asked the Minister. The Early Years Policy Development Board, one of the items on, one of the recommendations was to have qualified teachers in every nursery setting, and the intention could be, of course, that these are subsidised posts given struggles that the private nurseries are facing. And I understand that the current recruitment challenges over the last few years have meant that plan was on the back burner. Can the Minister reflect on this and whether that would still be a long-term goal in terms of those posts being funded perhaps in private nurseries?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I thank the Deputy for a question, because this is exactly the sort of discussion we need to have around early years about how are we going to ensure that we have the highest possible quality there. And I think the answer, my initial answer is that at this moment in time, yes, that will be a challenge, because we're trying to introduce an offer, we're trying to fund that. In the long term, I think the way that we work together with all of the providers to see what is best in terms of meeting the provision of young people is exactly what we need to do. There does seem to be been in the past, and I think we need a proper open discussion on this, what might be called an ideological disagreement over whether it's education or care and so on. I personally think that we need to start putting those two things together and look really carefully at what can be provided to be the best possible care. And as the Deputy probably already knows, I think we too often have formal education for our young children, and that the most successful educational establishments around the world don't formalise their education until a lot later on. The children learn play, socialisation, and that's what I think we should be aiming for in the much longer term. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary, Deputy Dooley?
Yes, thank you, sir. And what is the Minister doing in the short term then to ensure that that quality is being maintained and uplifted, not just in the school nurseries, but in the private nurseries, and that the private nurseries are supported to deliver that quality?
Thank you, sir. One of the key elements of what we've been trying to do with early years is about providing training, access to training, access to further qualifications for all staff that are working in nurseries. And that will go hand in hand, I believe, with the provision of the 15 hours. I mentioned before about the willingness, for example, of childminders to really be involved in that, which I think is really, really good. I think that's the first step, to make sure the training is available, look at the right training, look at what standards we expect across our provision, but get people to buy into that, not physically buy into it, but step into that space around that training provision for anyone who's involved in early years. We have to have it of equal value. It's very interesting that the projects that we have in the primary schools, when they advertise for posts, particularly the one at Dover, it attracted some extremely well qualified people because they wanted to work with children who have that challenge and that need. And I think that's such a healthy thing for us going forward, that we have people who are willing to do that. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. During the debate last year on post-16 education, Minister acknowledged the need of fairer approach to post-16 education, and said that he is bringing forward changes to education law to reflect this fairness. Will the Minister advise what actions have been taken in past 12 months to review and improve fairness in funding model for post-16 education, and when he intends to bring forward amendments to education law to embed this commitment given during the debate last year?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a very, very wide-ranging question. In terms of, is the Deputy referring to one particular area of post-16 education, or? Okay, one of the things I've been doing in the last couple of months with
Do you want to clarify? Sorry, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I would like to clarify. It was a proposition that Minister rejected, said that he's working on bringing this funding that is not fair for post-16 education between colleges and apprenticeship, and he assured the Assembly that he's bringing this equality in the funding for the post-16.
Minister. Yeah, thank you, sir. Apprenticeships if your apprenticeship is 1 day a week, it is funded 1/5 of what the funding would be for 5 days a week in a post-16 provision that is states funded. So I think that equality already exists. In terms of the efficiency of what we do and what we do in terms of post-16 provision, one of the important things I've been doing over the last 2 months with my Assistant Minister, Deputy Alves, is meeting young people from every single school on the island. We have one more school to visit, sir, which is Montalabe School, and taking their views on post-16 education. And it's been a very, very eye-opening experience. We will publish a report on that. It is qualitative research, sir. It won't be full of numbers, but I think qualitative research talking to young people is important. And one of the things that comes clear from that, to give a little precursor, is I think there's a lack of understanding and what we mean by apprenticeships, post-16 education in that area of vocational education. It is much wider than we realise, and I think it's a dialogue we need to be starting, which is equally as important, because that will determine our funding model in the longer term. So I think that conversation is a really important one going forward.
Supplementary, Deputy Gardner?
Absolutely. I would like the Minister explain his statement and what he meant in this sentence. I want to be clear that I recognise this need to be part of wider review of post-16 funding, and now will be bringing forward changes to the education law to reflect this fairness. Which changes the Minister referred?
Thank you, sir. The changes on what happens regards apprenticeships are being developed as we speak and the best way forward. In terms of post-16 education, we've made changes to distance learning, for example. We've made changes to the grant structures, which are all post-16 education and what they account for. We've made changes to some changes to postgraduate qualification criteria, and also some changes to HE funding itself in terms of the maintenance grants and so on. So there have been significant changes coming forward in specific areas. In terms of the overall post-16 and what we do with young people from 16 to 18, that is a wider piece of work which is ongoing and requires us to take a look at all of our structures, which is what we're doing at the moment in terms of the way they will fit together into the future with all of the challenges we face. I would like to see a much more open post-16 provision. I think the key thing is about providing what young people want to do, not necessarily just where they're going to go. And I think we do have some difficult discussions going forward when it comes to that.
Deputy Balash.
So on the 24th of October last year, the states voted to request the Minister to conduct a survey of the views of parents of preschool children as to the desirability of establishing bilingual English-French primary schools and their willingness to send their children to such a school. Will the Minister say whether such a survey has now been conducted, and if so, what the outcome was?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So, no, so the survey has not been conducted yet. We are working on the best way to do that. I think I mentioned in a previous question that we are working on conducting that survey linked to the NEF applications this year, because it seems to me a very logical way to do it. We have a number of families with young people who, if there is any change to bilingual schools into the future, it would affect them. And we are looking to redesign the application to give us access to their views so that they can fill out a survey, so it's the right people at the right time. And I will keep the Deputy informed, and I will go away from today and see if I can find him a date for this, because I have also been pushing this to happen, because I do want the survey to happen, because I'd like to know what the views are of these young people as well. So I can't give them a date at the moment, but I know that work is ongoing. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary?
So I'm grateful for the Minister's offer to keep me informed, but nearly 8 months have gone by since the states resolved that this survey should be undertaken. Can the states really have confidence that the Minister will ever do it?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Well, the only confidence I can give you is the very fact that we are working on the most efficient way to do this. I have been busy with a number of other things at the same time, obviously. But yes, we will conduct this survey. I think if we can work this out with those applying for the NEF, it will be a very quick, effective way to do it. And it will also mean that in the future, we may have a system for surveying on other areas of our provision. So, for example, the survey that's gone out on nursery provision in 2 to 3 has had over 2,500 replies, and we're very pleased that we've actually managed to get to some people, with so many people with such a small team. I apologise for the Deputy for not prioritising it as much as he wanted me to, but I will do my best to make sure that happens. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm if he has undertaken any assessment of what the total estimated cost will be of all known condition issues across the school estate, particularly those run by government? So has there been an assessment made? And if so, is he able to say how this compares with the capital funding that is currently available to the department? So I'm looking for the gaps.
Thank you, sir. I've been standing here today, that amount of data I simply don't have. Where the gaps are across the estate, yes, of course, that's what we're looking at all the time. There are wider things to discuss here as well. So, for example, and I hate to, well, I don't actually, I quite enjoy going back to this. We are currently spending an awful amount of money in repairs in old schools that really do need to be replaced. If we can get them replaced, that will cut down some of the need for trying to mitigate the circumstances in those schools, like Springfield, St Luke's, for example, La Passerelle. If we can get, we will have that built in October, and that will cut down some of those needs. But yes, there is. I'm sure the data exists. I'm sure the gaps exist, and I'm sure we're real about them. What tends to happen is it's about the timing of them. We've recently done a lot of work with Highlands College, for example, in planning out their work schedules, and I think that's been a very positive piece of work. And I give credit to Jersey Property Holdings and the Infrastructure Minister, as much as I mean, it pains me, I don't mean that, to do so, but there has been some really constructive dialogue to say actually what needs to be done, where's our priorities, and then let's get that done. I will mention as well, sir, that I do believe, I look across the Deputy Ferry, actually work on the Skye Youth Club will be starting this summer. I knew this, and I thought I might get a question on it, but anyway, there you go. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I think in some way the Minister may have answered some of the question, even though he has got the actual detail. But if he doesn't have the data at his fingertips, might he miss the opportunity to be able to quantify just how much money is needed to actually refurbish the school estate? And how does he intend to position that in the context of other bids for capital, particularly around Fort Regent and the hospital project?
Minister. Thank you, sir. So we're in a good position of having a number of relatively newly built secondary schools, for example. We know the need for a new primary school in the centre of St Helier, which will replace that estate, which is needy. The ongoing costs of repair obviously increase with age, but there's certainly something that we're aware of. In terms of the conflict between, and it is that, I suppose, the costs, you know, whether we want to spend on Fort Regent or our infrastructure, I actually think that what we are trying to do is have a genuine look at what we need for infrastructure on this island. And I do believe there is a belief across the Assembly and that education is an investment that we need to make longer term, and that investment will be made. So, for example, for post-16 provision, we need to look very seriously at what we can do for Highlands College in terms of anything new rather than just refurbishing it. And I certainly will be doing everything I can to try and promote that, because that's a really important part for training longer term for our young people and indeed older people, sir, if we're going to genuinely train people lifelong on this island.
I don't think there's a time for a question for you, Deputy Renner, if there's only 30 seconds left. Very quick question.
It was to ask if regarding educational psychology provision, whether the department is still on track to have 5 permanent educational psychologists in place by September.
I think so, yes. There was an action plan being put in place in the next few weeks, which I hope will address exactly that situation. I am aware of the problems that have arisen there. I wouldn't take about individual circumstances, but I am. There is definitely ongoing work to ensure that can happen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you both. That completes that period of questions. Now move on to questions for the Chief Minister, and the first question is from Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. After the publication of R97, the 2024 annual reports and accounts of the state-owned entities, does the Chief Minister approve of large bonuses being paid to CEOs and CFOs of those companies, and does he believe that they are justified? Thank you.
Well, sir, it would depend on the circumstances. I have no problem with executives of arm's length organisations being properly rewarded with bonuses when it's justified, sir. So rather than comment, I think if I could leave my answer there, if it's not justified, I don't think a bonus should be paid. If it is, I have no problem with it.
Supplementary, Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. The total amount of bonuses paid to those chief officers during 2024 was £960,000. just shy of 1 million. Does the Chief Minister acknowledge that the majority of Islanders will not believe this is appropriate, considering the very average performance of some of those SOEs? Thank you, sir.
Yes, so I need to look at the individual cases, but I do share the Deputy's concern about the level of bonuses. They should be set at a fair and appropriate level. And I think, sir, in some circumstances, that's been exceeded.
Connétable, St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. As the Chief Minister is no doubt aware, sir, for some time now in Jersey, the price of food has been absolutely skyrocketing. Is the Chief Minister aware that the budget supermarket Iceland has all but disappeared, all but 2 Iceland stores remain, the rest being converted to Morrison's? Is the Chief Minister concerned that many people on a budget, and including seniors, are struggling at the moment to fill their bread basket? And will he agree with his ministers to monitor the situation?
Minister.
Yes, I would like to see much more aggressive competition in the food retail market. I think we probably have too much square footage of food retail space spread amongst too many destinations in the interest of convenience. Near to my house, I think I've got a choice of five shops within a 3 or 4 minute drive. I don't know if there's an easy fix for that, but Jersey, I think, would be far better served by fewer, larger supermarkets that could offer better prices with better productivity and better efficiency. It's been a challenge we've been facing for a long time. I had hoped that the introduction of Morrison's, a well-known major multiple brand for the UK, would help drive more competition. It hasn't worked out that way as yet, but we're monitoring the situation.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Chief Minister for that response, sir. Even though it's the cost of transporting goods, even between supermarkets, now that Morrison's has been mentioned, there's sometimes a 30p addition on, say, a tin of beans. The cost of transport from the UK, with current events happening in the Middle East, the cost of transport is likely to increase even further. Has the Chief Minister taken that into account?
Chief Minister.
Yes, I think there's. I refer to my previous answer. I know the industry fairly well from a former life, and there are, I think, significantly higher margins being made across certain sectors in the UK simply down to volume. When you have more volume, you can work on reduced margins. So I refer, Connétable, to my previous answer that if we perhaps had fewer sites at the expense of perhaps convenience, but operating larger premises, we could see more productivity and we could see lower prices coming through. But I'm afraid that's rather difficult for the government to manage because, of course, we're dealing with a group of private businesses who have set out their stall. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer other than we need to keep encouraging more competition. And as I said, we have some major UK multiples working here and now. And I don't always see a clear explanation for why there is such a big price differential between here and the UK. So that's something I will be urging the Competition Authority to address.
Just so members know, the following members are to ask questions in the following order in which their lights went on. Deputy Ozef, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Jeune, Deputy Ward, Deputy Brenner, Deputy Dublé. Deputy Ozef.
I'm delighted to follow my constable, sir. The Chief Minister entered the States as a Deputy of St Saviour with me in St Helier. He knows that I've read The Economist since I was 16. I think I've probably read some with him. There was an article on the 20th of March that said, Leader, rent killed, subline, if you can't find a place, blame the government. It said, foolish crusade against landlords have made housing shortages worse. Is he going to help the people of St Saviour, who the Constable and I and the other deputies have to listen to their terrible cries of rental increases, social markets, housing being sold off, and basically not being able to sell their properties if they've got divorced or otherwise with negative equity? Is he going to listen to the people of St Saviour, who he once represented? Because there is a crisis, sir, and we've got socialist government at work, and can he stand by it, and what's he going to do about it?
Chief Minister.
I think that was about 9 questions, sir, but I do my very best. No, we don't have a socialist government. We have a balanced government that's representative of this assembly. Of course, I listen, and this government listens to all islanders. We are aware of the cost of living challenges, not least in the last 18 months, given the geopolitical challenges. As members know, a lot of this is outside of our control, which is why the government has made it a top priority to do whatever it can to help bear down on the cost of living, sir. And if there's another question, sir, I'd like to be reminded of it.
Supplementary?
So can I raise standing order 44, please? It says about the midday adjournment, if business of the states, it just says that you're asked to ask the Assembly at 12:45.
The word is shall. Do members wish to adjourn now? Yes. Members content to adjourn now?
Could we have the, maybe allow that last supplementary and then perhaps adjourn?
You're full of good ideas today, aren't you, Tony? Yes, final supplementary from you before we adjourn?
Sir, I'm very pleased. I'm happy to adjourn with the Chief Minister and have a discussion with him. He's invited me about the fuel farm, and I'm very happy to discuss that because there's able contributions that can be made by all members of this Assembly, and he needs to understand the issues. And I would invite him to come to St Saviour and talk to some of the real people. Will he come to actually and listen to the real problems of housing that we've got in St Saviour? Actually listen to real voters. Would he come on a chat on a trip with me and the Constable and the other deputies?
I'll happily come to visit Parish Hall again with the Constable and the deputy. I would with any parish, sir, and listen to concerns. But as I say, I would like to reiterate that the government is aware of the challenges. I'm not sure we're in total crisis as an island, although I do realise hardship impacts upon some more than others, and those are the people we are committed and duty-bound to help, sir.
Members content to adjourn now?
Sir.
The Assembly is adjourned until 2:15.
Sorry, sir. Can I just remind members to meet me in the Ivy Forster room for the EAV Romanian blouse display I emailed about? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for reminding us.